So welcome. This is such an exciting day for all of us. It feels like we've been waiting for this day for months and months and months because we heard the news way back in October. So we are thrilled that we can all be gathered here today to celebrate the Teacher of the Year and the alternates. We're also excited because we have so many special guests. Our State Board of Education, Governor, Mayor, families, friends, community members. So we are just thrilled that everyone is here to be with us today. We're going to get started with our interim superintendent, Dr. Howard Smith. So I'm going to ask Dr. Howard Smith to come on up here so we can get going.
Good morning, everyone. And I certainly would like to welcome you all here today, because it's a very special occasion. You know, we celebrate actors and athletes and musicians all the time, but as an educator, I can tell you it gives me great pleasure to be here today celebrating teachers. And Rebecca would be the first to say that we are here today, at least in part, to celebrate the work of all teachers. But that said, the Teacher of the Year is very special. Teacher of the Year is someone whose commitment to the profession comes from deep within them. Maybe they always knew they were going to be a teacher ever since they were the age of some of you boys and girls here. Maybe it came to them later in life, but at some point they listened to that voice that was calling them to the profession, and it became their passion. When you go into the classroom of a Teacher of the Year, you will not only see someone who is very good at all the technical aspects of what a teacher does. You are watching an artist at work. We are very fortunate to have such an artist right here at Burlington, in our very own Champlain Elementary School. I'm very proud to be here. And I would like to now turn it over to our Mayor, Darrell Weinberg.
Good morning, everyone. This is great to be with you here today out at Champlain. And I want to invite you whenever you're down, all of you, whenever you're down on Church Street near City Hall, come on in and say hi. We love having visitors in the mayor's office, and I encourage your teachers to come and bring you as well. What a great morning we have here in Burlington. This is a celebration on many levels. It is a celebration of both a great individual teacher as well as a teacher who represents wonderful teaching throughout the district. As the parent of a third grader who has each and every year had wonderful teachers, we know that it's no accident that a Burlington teacher today is being recognized as the Teacher of the Year. This is an opportunity to celebrate the work that the school district and the city is doing to become as inclusive a city as possible, to become a place where every child has the opportunity to succeed, no matter their background. This is hard work. The teachers in the room today are on the front lines of that work, but we are making great progress, and part of our honoree today is recognizing the work she's done in that area as well. And finally, this is a chance to celebrate Burlington's rise as a great city, as a great place to raise a family, as a great place for the arts, as a great tech city, as a great place for healthy living, as a city of equity. And the school district is leading the city in all of those areas, and today's event is an opportunity to recognize that enormous success and the fact that we have even brighter days ahead of us as a school district in the city. So congratulations to everyone being honored today. It's been an honor to be here with you. Thank you.
And now we'll be joined by music instructor Betsy Green and some children to kick off the day.
Thank you. Today we have the whole school singing for celebration. It's not we all wanted to participate to say congratulations to Rebecca as well to all the two folks here today. And so we've chosen a song that we have in our school repertoire called What Can One Little Person Do? And it has verses that about people who've done something on their own that have changed the world, like Rosa Parks or Dr. Martin Luther King, and now we have our very own Mrs. Hassan, and we've written a new verse for her. So if you are a visitor or a guest, you can turn around and see some pictures of Mrs. Hassan up there as we go through. And you can follow the words, and if you want, you can join in with us too. And 4th and 5th graders, remember? 4th and 5th graders, are you looking at me? You see? Do you see what I see? What I'm doing? Yes. Okay. Jeff, the two closest to you, can you hit the bottom? Yeah. No, I guess the other.
Everybody. I'm Rebecca Holcomb, and I'm Vermont's Secretary of Education, but most of all today I'm an educator, and I'm so proud to be here to celebrate our Vermont teachers. Let's hear a hand for all of them. There are many wonderful things about our schools in Vermont, but our teachers are the heart and soul of our school. They're what makes schools work for the young people who come to them every day. And it is wonderful to be able to come and recognize some of our Vermont teachers here. I want to first of all ask Luke Foley to stand up if you could. Luke is the outgoing teacher of the year, and I wanted to take this time to recognize him because Luke really embodies the spirit of innovation that our teachers bring to this work. They know that what our students need is somebody who believes in them and is willing to endlessly go the extra mile to make sure that every child has an advocate in their court who's going to help them get to where they need to go. And Luke is someone who really embodies that. And the other thing that Luke really embodies is the spirit of innovation. When instruction doesn't work, because in this room there is many different kinds of brains and minds as there are children. And what works for one child may not work for another child. Luke knows what all good teachers know, which is that when one strategy doesn't work, you try again, and you find a different way to think about teaching so that every child has a chance to learn. And Luke is someone who really looked at what was happening at the state level in terms of some of the state policies, including those created by this board, in terms of personalization and flexibility of learning, and did some hard work to figure out what that could look like in his school, and developed some prototypes which are really models for teachers across the state. And without teachers like Luke, who really grappled with the hard challenges that we faced and did some experimentation and then shared their work, we wouldn't be able to benefit and learn as teachers and educators across buildings to make things better for our students. So I want to call you out. I'm also going to ask the rest of the teachers of the year, so keep standing because you're joining this group. There are a number of teachers of the year in the room, and I'd love you all to stand. I believe there are. Yep, there you go. Got a couple more. Thanks. like these. And behind every one of these individuals, there's a school full of individuals who are really bringing their best game every day to this work. And we are very fortunate in Vermont to have so many teachers who are deeply passionate and dedicated to their work and working consistently to try to make things better for kids in the classroom. And I will tell you that if you talk to any of these individuals and ask them about why they were selected as Teacher of the Year, they'll tell you something, and then within 2 or 3 minutes, they'll tell you what they're trying to do better. Because that really is what they're like. They're never satisfied with their practice and their work and their efforts to make teachers better. And that's part of why they're so great. They're constantly trying to figure out how to do this work better. So we're all deeply indebted on behalf of Vermont's children and our parents and our community. I just want to say thank you again for all you've done for kids and continue to do. I want to turn to someone very special, not just because she shares my name, which is a wonderful name. A couple months ago, the Civil Rights Project released a report, and it said that, among other things, Vermont is really on the cusp of a demographic transition, and I think Mayor Weinberg referred to this. We are very fortunate in that we are a state in transition, and we are becoming a more diverse state. And the families that are moving into our state and making us more diverse bring incredible energy, passion, resources, talents, and strengths. And as Vermont, what we have an opportunity to do is learn from the experiences of other states and try to do this work better so that we can really celebrate and benefit and share and be partners and work shoulder to shoulder with all children and all families to make sure our state has vibrant civic communities and strong economic life. And I say that because we live also in a time of federal policy which is really focused on defining kids, in many cases, in terms of their test scores, which ends up being defining them in terms of what they can't do. And if you think about what it means to be a child who comes to this country, maybe you don't speak English, and you have to take a test a month later in a language that isn't your own, of course you're not going to do as well as you might, but it doesn't mean you don't have wonderful strengths and abilities that you share, you bring to your class and to your community. We also live in a federal policy environment which is busy ranking teachers. Really, when you think about it, comparing teachers to other teachers in terms of how their students do on test scores. And the challenge with this is that these communities that are really grappling and engaging with the challenges of poverty are the communities where the skill and the brilliance of teaching may be shrouded by those challenges of poverty. We may not see those effects. And that's really disappointing because it can hide some of the tremendous innovation and creative teaching that's going on. One of the things that I find so tremendously inspiring about our nominee, our Teacher of the Year this year, is because as Vermont is becoming a more diverse state and really thinking about how to support the learning of every child, we have a Teacher of the Year this year who really embodies this on so many levels. And her work is consistently characterized not by looking at what children can't do, but by taking the time to understand them as individuals and understand what they can do, focusing on their strengths and figuring out how to bring those strengths into the community to enrich the whole community and make it better for everybody. And the other thing that we admire and respect so much about you, Rebecca, is that you really understand that good teachers don't exist in isolation. Good teachers are good because they work with colleagues who are good teachers. And if you look even in the national research on highly effective teachers, you tend to find that highly effective teachers, even based on test scores, are in highly effective schools where there are lots of them. And that's because teaching is probably the hardest job that anyone can have. It really is. I'm sorry, Governor Shumlin, I think your job is harder. Because it's so complicated and because we care so much. And you don't do this work unless you really do. But what's so powerful about your work, Rebecca, is that you really understand that not only is it your job to help your colleagues become better, but you also reach out and get better from your colleagues. And that's what we have to do. To make our schools as strong as they can be, we need to have school faculty where teachers feel free to take risks, to share their incredible expertise, and to learn from each other about how to make our schools powerful for our children, because our children deserve no less. So I'm absolutely thrilled to be able to recognize you today, and so grateful for all you do for not just your own children here, but also for children across the state as a role model, and I really look forward to working with you over the next year. And with that, I'm really pleased to turn this over to Governor Shumlin, who's going to recognize the Teachers of the Year.
Thank you so much, Secretary Holcomb, and I'm proud to have you as my Secretary of Education, and you've just proven again why, so thank you from the bottom of my heart. I also can't tell you how honored I am to be here with all of you extraordinary students here at Champlain Elementary. You make the work that the teachers and the staff and all the people that make education in Vermont work. You make it all worth it. So thank you so much for joining us for this celebration. I want to thank Leslie Calm, who worked so hard as principal of this great school. Howard Smith, thanks for your words. A special shout out to Moreau Weinberger, who's just doing an extraordinary job leading the Queen City, and as a parent cares deeply about the educational experience of all our kids. And I also got to give a shout out to Betsy Green and the great music program that you got together here. Thank you. Now, I have the honor of doing the honors, and before I do, I just want to also thank two folks, two groups of people. First is the hard-working State Board of Education that makes our educational policy so critical to actually getting results. Thank you, Chairman Morse and the entire team. Stand up. We want our State Board to stand up because they work hard for very little glory. So thank you. Appreciate it. And the second group, we'd be remiss, since we're really celebrating all of the folks who make our schools tick today, and I think Rebecca would be the first to say that. Thank you to the faculty, to the staff, to all of the folks, administrators who make this school and all the schools across Vermont tick. We deeply appreciate the magic that you're making happen for every kid in Vermont. So thank you so much. Stand up, come on, we're gonna give you all a hand. Every staff member in the school, stand up because we love you. Thank you. There we go, we're working hard for you. Thank you so much. Now listen, I have the honor of recognizing the folks that we're going to celebrate today. And we're going to keep it short, but I just want to say before we do, that as you look around this auditorium and the extraordinary students that are before us, it's worth remembering that in my line of work, and I understand that my job is easier than being a teacher, but only marginally so, that in my line of work, we spend a lot of time talking about you and focusing on your educational experience, understanding that our most important obligation as a state is to ensure that each and every one of you gets the best education we can possibly deliver for you, and that you study and learn as long as you possibly can, beyond elementary school, beyond high school, beyond college if possible, but that you get as far as you can. We sometimes forget that in all the work that we're doing, talking about how we pay for school and how we deliver education, that you're the most important resource, that you're the most important thing, and that it's in our journey to do it right, and the disagreements that we might have from time to time about how to get there, and the pressures that people feel to pay for education. We must never pit teachers against Vermonters, school board members against Vermonters, students against Vermonters as we pursue the right policies, because when we're united, we get results like we're getting right here at Champlain Valley Elementary. So thank you so much for all the great work. Champlain Elementary, thank you for all the great work that you do. So the awards we're about to give to the individuals that we're about to mention remind us of the great work we're doing and the great work that they are doing. And the first individual that we're going to represent and celebrate today has done amazing things that happen in his high school classrooms when you blend learning classic literature with the latest technologies that we know are available to us in education. It's important to know that this particular individual, Alan Crowley, who is our distinguished finalist this year for the 2015 Vermont Teacher of the Year Award. Alan has endured some health challenges, would have done anything to be here today, I think it's fair to say. I know that our thoughts and our prayers are with him. But we have Dennis Hill here, who's the principal of Missisquoi Valley Union High School here, to recognize Alan's extraordinary work. So, Dennis, come on up, give a hand to all the extraordinary work of Alan Crowley and his team.
Thank you so much. I'm using my voice, so I'll try to be quick. First of all, lots of people are being recognized today. I'd like to recognize all of you students who are doing such an incredible job. Give yourselves a round of applause for all the nice job you're doing, guys and girls. Alan Crowley makes my life as a principal extremely easy. He is a genius. He is passionate. He works harder than anyone I've ever seen. He has embraced the growth mindset and the idea of proficiency as a demonstration of students learning more than anyone I've ever seen, and he has helped me to move my school forward in a way that I could not have done without him and all of the hardworking teachers that I have there. So real quickly, I'm going to just read a quick sentence from Alan's application that sort of sums up, I think, what he has become as a teacher. He has said, "I've learned to recognize my best teaching self is not the one who can prove his own knowledge and skill, but the one who can always strive to assume and recognize the best in others." And he lives it every day, and he makes my job very easy. He's a wonderful man, and I wish him the best in his health recovery, and he's expected to make a full recovery. So please help me recognize Alan Crowley. Thank you.
Thank you so much. The next award that we get to celebrate is our 2015 Vermont Teacher of the Year alternate. Just to say a few words about our alternate. Our alternate is a remarkable young teacher who has demonstrated great promise as a leader in her school. And also, she's located right here in Burlington, so Burlington gets a doubleheader today. This music educator is also a coach for the other educators for using positive behavior interventions and supports to ensure that all students experience their school day in a safe and supporting learning environment. Please join me in recognizing our 2015 Vermont Teacher of the Year alternate, Christina Norland of Edmonds Elementary School. Christina, thank you so much for your support.
Thank you, and I'd like to recognize all teachers of the arts in Vermont at this moment who see really unique qualities in kids and help encourage their creativity and their wonderful positive energy and help those kids become even better and more beautiful and help them to express their joy even more clearly. Thank you on behalf of all arts teachers in Vermont.
Go, Christina. And now for the finale. It's a huge honor to be able to recognize our 2015 Teacher of the Year. When I was coming in today, there was a father who I know of one of your students, Rebecca, who was from last year, who was running in the door, and I said, "What are you doing here?" Because I usually see him in other context, you know, in court or something. But anyway, he said, "I'm here because I'm not business. I'm here for Rebecca." I said, "That's so great. Didn't know you knew her." He said, "Yeah. She was my daughter's teacher last year. And she did more than anyone I know to get my daughter really excited about learning." And that's really, Rebecca, why we're honoring you today for the entire state of Vermont. Because you have gotten so many kids excited about learning, regardless of how they learn. You never give up, and you inspire people from all walks of educational experience. I can tell you as a governor who is dyslexic and learns differently, that had I not had a Vermont teacher who believed in me, who believed that somehow, with enough hard work and enough extra time, she could teach me how to read. And I gotta tell you, it really helps to be able to read if you're a governor. That I wouldn't be standing before you at this moment probably with this job. So that's the kind of spirit that we're celebrating when we recognize our Teacher of the Year this year. As you know, this year's winner is a first grade teacher right here, and she's also the district social studies and equity curriculum coach for grades K through 5. As the 2015 Teacher of the Year, she's going to be able to travel statewide across our state, working with teachers and with my agency of education to inspire other teachers to be great. In addition, she's Vermont's candidate for the National Teacher of the Year Award, which I'm going to be rooting hard for, sponsored by the Council of Chief State School Officers. Over your spring break in April, she'll be traveling to Washington, D.C. for a reception at the White House, where she'll be honored by the President of the United States, Barack Obama. I know that Rebecca has a lot of fans here, but I got to point out that I don't think there's any greater fans that she has, believe it or not, than James and her two boys who are sitting here patiently waiting for me to pass this one out. But I just got to say, without further ado, Rebecca, we're proud that we've got you. We're proud of the extraordinary work you do to transform the lives of kids every single day. And let's give a big hand to our 2015 Vermont Teacher of the Year, Rebecca.
Vermont and all the amazing teachers we have here in the state. I need to start by thanking the State Board of Education, the members of the Agency of Education, and the Selection Committee for giving me this opportunity. Thank you to Governor Fenlon, to Mayor Weinberger, and the other Vermont State Teachers of the Year, and thanks for the press for coming today as well. Special thanks for Jill Remick, and also to Jay Hoffman for your guidance and support throughout this process. I need to thank my family at St. Michael's College, Dr. Valerie Von Jensen, Dr. Jonathan Silverman, Dr. Ann Judson for starting me on my journey as a teacher 15 years ago, and for their continued support ever since. I'm so grateful to be able to pursue my passion at work every day. I want to thank some people who have supported me, encouraged me, and helped me sustain and realize my vision for teaching social justice. Thank you to Stephanie Phillips for being determined to send me to the Summit for Courageous Conversations back in 2012. For believing in teaching about equity embedded in curriculum, and for supporting it with the creation of the social studies coaching position. Thank you to Henry Sparks and the Department of Equity and Community Partnerships for supporting me as an emerging leader of the Equity Council, and for your guidance and support designing our equity conversations for professional development. Thank you to Leslie Coulomb for supporting everything I do, and for always making time for me, for believing in my potential within and beyond the classroom walls. To Jane Miller, for your mentorship, your literary expertise, and your maternal care as my teaching partner for 3 years. Thank you to all my colleagues here at Champlain, to my grade level teammates, Nancy Leon, Janine Galusha, and Penny Stearns. And mostly I want to thank my family, my husband James Haslam, who pushes me every day to exceed my own expectations, encourages me even when I want to give up. Excuse me. For his love and patience, his passion for justice, and his partnership in life. And thank you to my sweet baby boys, Will and Reed, for reminding me every day why I do what I do. Needless to say, I wouldn't be here without you, all of you. Thank you to my students, my class this year, and all our wonderful Champlain families for your trust, support, and partnership and dedication to children over the years. I'm so grateful for this honor, and at the same time I understand that it comes with a responsibility to advocate for the amazing work that we do each and every day. I know firsthand the impact of not having an inclusive education, not ever seeing myself or people who looked like me reflected in textbooks or even portrayed in fiction. I know what it feels like to be hyper-visible all the time, yet never encouraged to speak up. And I recognize that all of us have an opportunity to present a different reality to our students today. Public education is the foundation of democracy, and it is our moral imperative to make it available to every child, starting in the formative years. We need to fully fund early childhood education to close the opportunity gap and provide equal access to a foundation of success for all children. Especially in an age of vast inequity, we need to prepare our young people to be able to participate in a democratic society and meet the future challenges that await them with strength of character, confidence, and a sense of justice. In order to stop the perpetuation of underachievement of students of color, we need to own the gap. It's a huge challenge, but I've bear witness to 11 years of progress in Burlington already, and I plan to continue to help lead us into the future. Our country still has tremendous amounts of progress to make with regards to social justice. On a national level, we're dealing with serious systems of racism and oppression and excessive force in communities of color. How can communities combat racism and start to make progress? By teaching the next generation. The solution starts with us here in our schools. I am proud to be a public school teacher here in Vermont. We have a lot of work to do in order to create the just and equitable world we envision for our children, but we have never been better positioned to do so than now. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Stephanie Phillips, Director of Curriculum for Burlington School District. Until about a decade ago, the term coach primarily brought sports to our minds. Now, educational coaches have joined the spotlight and are recognized as a vital component to embedded professional development in schools. In some ways, the roles of these two types of coaches are similar. Consider the following quote from Vince Lombardi, legendary coach of the Green Bay Packers. Coaches who can outline plays on the blackboard are a dime a dozen. The ones who win get inside their player and motivate. The idea of connections and motivation is also true for academic coaches. As a school district, we embrace coaching as an incredibly powerful tool in teacher professional development that results in improved teaching and learning. Coaching is not about telling teachers what is wrong and how to fix it, or about handing them a plan to follow in isolation, but rather it is about giving them the tools and encouragement to move themselves forward. Coaches are great listeners who ask the right questions and provide a positive, unwavering belief that by leading collaborative efforts, they can help their colleagues to improve classroom practice. Phil Jackson, reflecting on his experience as an NBA coach, made the following statement: "Good teams become great ones when members trust each other enough to surrender the me for the we." As curriculum director, I want coaches who know their content, but more importantly, I look for coaches who can build relationships with teachers and help them to grow as professional, lifelong learners. Successful academic coaches are the ones who know their craft and have the gift of building relationships that help good teachers to become great ones. We are fortunate today to be recognizing an amazing content coach. Rebecca first captured my attention during her time as a full-time classroom teacher. At district in-service and curriculum meetings, I saw her passion for teaching children as she shared samples of student work and spoke with colleagues of the lessons she was developing to teach her students. Colleagues have always appreciated Rebecca's calm presence and supportive nature, balanced with her enthusiasm, passion, and energy that she brings to all her work. Rebecca was one of our first elementary teachers to truly embrace technology, both for the application of incorporating 21st century learning themes in her instruction as well as a tool to expand communication with families. For the past 2 years, we have been fortunate to have Rebecca as an elementary coach. She has led her colleagues in creating engaging and rigorous units of study to allow students to explore, understand, and celebrate the rich diversity of our district. In addition to her work specifically with the coaching from the curriculum office, Rebecca is a district leader with our equity team. One highlight of her work is leading the initiative to be part of a team that creates K-12 professional development modules being implemented throughout the district. Her leadership is instrumental to the work of increasing teacher cultural competency from the perspective of a classroom teacher. Rebecca embodies all the important qualities to be an effective teacher leader. Rebecca, as you travel the state, you will touch the lives of many educators who will benefit from all you have to share. Congratulations and best wishes for an exciting year as you enter the next chapter in your professional journey.
Among our distinguished speakers, we have two of Rebecca's former students who have some words to share.
My name is Mahela Marshall. I go to Edmonds Middle School. I'm in 8th grade, and I had Miss Haslam as my first grade teacher. All right, to start, I would like to say thank you. Miss Haslam, you gave me the greatest gift of my life so far. When I came into your first grade classroom on the first day of school, I couldn't read, not one single bit. After working with you throughout the school year, I was inspired to learn to read. I had always loved listening to books, but never had the urge to actually pick one up. It was your belief in me and your instruction and our hard work that got me caught up with my classmates by the end of the school year. During the summer, I came into the school for some tutoring from you. One memory I have was the first day I came in, you let me go to the teacher's supply closet to pick out any notebook I wanted. I felt so cool getting to have my notebook and being able to go to the teacher's supply closet. After those summer sessions, I went into 2nd grade being one of the top readers in my class. Learning to read has expanded my world. Books and stories transport me to different cultures, different lives, and different possibilities. From you, I didn't just learn to read, I learned to love reading. Last fall, when I took the kneecaps, I was 1 point away from perfect on the reading section. I'm not saying this to brag, but rather to let you know that all your time and patience with 6-year-old me was worth the investment. Yes, you taught me how to read, but more importantly, you taught me to work hard and persevere. You changed my life. Thank you.
Not only was Mrs. Haslam a great teacher in the classroom, she was also a spectacular teacher outside of the classroom. She helped me become friends with someone who I most likely would not have become friends with on my own. She worked diligently trying to set up playdates as this child is a new American and there is a language barrier. A similar situation that makes Mrs. Haslam stand out was when there was a child in her class who loved to run. Again, there was a language barrier, so she filled out the paperwork for this child to be in an after-school program that celebrates young runners and encourages kids to eat healthy. Not only did she sign him up, but she made sure that this student had a ride home, so she organized different parents to drive him. These are only 2 examples of the many ways Mrs. Haslam cares deeply for her students and the community she teaches in. Mrs. Haslam is the most memorable teacher in and outside of the learning environment. She helped students access their passions, kept them in line, and taught them to love learning. I once read a quote by an anonymous writer, and it said, "The best teachers teach from the heart and not the book." When I read that quote, I immediately thought of Mrs. Haslam. She really does teach with an open heart and shares her love for teaching and her students every day. I am the luckiest girl in the state of Vermont to have had Mrs. Haslam as a teacher. All of the successes I have had is because of her. She will always be very special to me. Thank you.
While we're at it, we'd like to hear from Penny Stern, Rebecca's co-teacher, and Rebecca's current class.
The important thing about Miss Haslam is that she is nice, she is good at reading to us, she is the teacher of the year, she is special to us, she loves us and we love her. She is our teacher, she helps. The important thing about Miss Haslam is that she is nice, she is good at reading to us, she is the teacher of the year, she is special to us, she loves us and we love her. She is our teacher, she helps us when we get stuck, but the important thing about Miss Haslam is that she is nice.
The important thing about Mrs. Haslam is that she is good at reading. She is the teacher of the year. She is nice. She gets to go to the White House. She is a teacher. She loves us. She is the best teacher. But the important thing about Mrs. Haslam is that she is good at reading.
The important thing about Mrs. Haslam is that she is nice. She gets to go to the White House. She is good at reading. She is the teacher of the year, but the important thing about Mrs. Haslam is that she is nice.
The important thing about Mrs. Haslam is that she is our teacher. She is special. She takes care of us at school. The important thing about Mrs. Haslam is that she is our teacher. The important thing about Mrs. Haslam is that she is special to us. She loves us. We love Miss Haslam. She is kind. She is nice. She is funny. But the important thing about Mrs. Haslam is that she is special to us.
The important thing about Mrs. Haslam is that she is our teacher. She helps us when we are stuck on work. She is the best because she teaches us a lot of things. But the important thing about Mrs. Haslam is she is our teacher.
The important thing about Mrs. Haslam is that she is good at reading. She is nice to us. She is the teacher of the year. She gets to go to the White House. But the important thing about Mrs. Haslam is that she is good at reading.
The important thing about Mrs. Haslam is that she is good at teaching. She is going to the White House. She helps us learn, but the important thing about Mrs. Haslam is that she is good at teaching.
The important thing about Mrs. Haslam is that she loves us and we love her. And she's the teacher of the year, and the important thing about you is that you love us and we love you.
The important thing about Mrs. Haslam is she helps us. She is our teacher, but the important thing about Mrs. Haslam is she helps us. The important thing about Mrs. Haslam is she helps us. She is our teacher. But the important thing about Mrs. Haslam is she helps us.
The important thing about Mrs. Haslam is that she's helpful, she's kind, she's helpful, she helps us when we're stuck on a word. But the important thing about Mrs. Haslam is that she's kind.
The important thing about Mrs. Haslam is that she is a good teacher. She helps us and takes care of us. But the important thing about Mrs. Haslam is that she is a teacher. The important thing about Mrs. Haslam is that she is our teacher. She helps us when we are stuck. But the important thing about Mrs. Haslam is that she is our teacher.
The important thing about Miss Haslam is that she loves us. She helps us when we are stuck. She is good at reading. She is the teacher of the year. She is the best. She was on the news. I like her. She likes me. But the important thing about Miss Haslam is that she loves us.
The important thing about Mrs. Haslam is that she gets to go to the White House. She loves us and we love her. She misses us if we are sick. But the important thing about Mrs. Haslam is that she gets to go to the White House.
The important thing about Miss Haslam is that she is our teacher. She gets to go to the White House. She loves us. She takes care of us at school. But the important thing about Miss Haslam is that she is our teacher.
The important thing about Mrs. Haslam is that she gets to go to the White House to meet President Obama. Woo, she is nice. We are nice. She is the Vermont Teacher of the Year for 2015. But the important thing about Mrs. Haslam is that she gets to go to the White House to meet President Obama.
The important thing about Mrs. Haslam is that she loves us and we love her. She is nice, she reads to us, but the important thing about Mrs. Haslam is that she loves us and we love her.
The important thing about Mrs. Haslam is that she is nice. She is the teacher of the year. But the important thing about Mrs. Haslam is that she is nice.
The important thing about Miss Haslam is she is the best teacher. She is nice because she reads to us. She is the best reader I have ever seen. But the important thing about Miss Haslam is that she is the best teacher.
The important thing about Mrs. Haslam is that she loves us and we love her. She's special to us. She is good at reading to us. She helps us when we are stuck on words. But the important thing about Mrs. Haslam is that she loves us. Thank you for being our teacher.
Hello, everyone. Thank you. I'd like to, that was so beautiful. May we have just Mrs. Haslam's and Mrs. Stern's current students just stand and we can give them an applause for doing such a nice job. Instrumentalist. This song, I've given words to all our people up here to sing along with us. This was championed by Pete Seeger. As you know, you don't watch Pete Seeger, you join him. And so we're going to join in today. And this song was written by Lord Wyatt, and it's to recognize the importance of how we're all connected to each other and how we're all responsible for taking care of each other and the earth. And I think that embodies not only Mrs. Haslam's work, but all of our work we do and why we're all here today. So thank you very much. And please join us. And we'll sing the chorus first so you can get it, and then we'll go back and sing the chorus one more time. And special thank you to Jeff Wick. He brought in the sound system for us today. And we have a bunch of parents here. This is Adam Hall and Anna Grusnick and Laura Barbieri and Ethan Brown. Thank you.
you everyone for being with us, and thank you Betsy Green and all the accompanists and our students. You did a marvelous job out there. It was super.
I will call the December meeting of the State Board of Education to order. We are at the Champlain Elementary School in Burlington, and we've just witnessed one of the highlights of the year, a wonderful ceremony celebrating the 2015 Teacher of the Year. And so I want to thank the folks at Champlain Elementary for hosting us and putting on such a wonderful affair. I think I have finally got my wish. We usually start these meetings with the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag, and I do not see an American flag in sight. So we're going to move on. If anyone wants to stand up and salute the state flag, be my guest, but we're not going to start our meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Wow. In the efficiency of time.
Yes, in the interest of time. As you probably already know, there's a sign-up sheet over on the table. If you haven't signed in, please do. We'll go around the table and introduce the individual board members. I'm Stephen Morse from Newfane, Chair of the State Board of Education.
I'm Sean Ray Oler from Bennington.
Krista Hewling from Jeffersonville.
Bonnie Johnson-Aiton, Montpelier.
Margaret McLean from Peacham.
Mark Perrin from Middlebury. Dylan McAllister from Greensboro.
Bill Mathis, Goshen.
Stacy Weinberger, Burlington.
Thank you. Why don't we go around the room and do similar introductions, just your name and if you have a position.
Hi, I'm Martha Allen, President of Vermont NEA and a 30-year veteran teacher.
Julie Longchamp, the Director of Professional Programs for Vermont NEA and a 30-year veteran teacher.
I'm Mill Moore, Executive Director of the Vermont Independent Schools Association.
I'm Don Collins, and I'm a 50-year veteran of education, interested citizen.
Ken Page, Director of the Vermont Principals Association.
I'm Susie Merrick, a South Burlington parent.
I'm Gabriella Tufo-Strauss, parent of a child at Champlain and also the Director of the Volunteer Mentor Program at King Street Center.
Jay Hoffman, teacher, South Burlington School District, representing the Vermont Professional Standards Board today.
Katie Michael, South Burlington High School student.
Nicole Mace, General Counsel for the Vermont School Boards Association.
Jeffrey Francis, Executive Director for the Vermont Superintendents Association.
Steve Dale, the Executive Director of the School Boards Association.
Hallie Richards, Deputy Chief of Staff, Governor Shumlin.
And Chad Butt, the Executive Director of Mobius, Vermont's Mentoring Partnership.
Pleased to have you all here. We should take note of Allie's new title on the 5th floor, and congratulations on. But we hope it means that you will continue to be the lead person for education and our contact person. Terrific.
Tell them the public what her title is.
What her title is? She just introduced herself.
Oh, Deputy. Could you say it louder?
Deputy Chief of Staff and Director of the if you want the full.
Are there members of the public that wish to be heard this morning? Please step up. And if you'd identify yourself, that would be helpful. Again, even though you just introduced yourself.
Oh, it's not a problem at all. Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Susie Merrick, and I am a community member in South Burlington. I come here this morning in celebration and gratitude for the work of the Vermont State Board of Education and all of our schools in Vermont. I am a parent in the South Burlington School District, and as of this school year, I am also an employee of the South Burlington School District, specifically the SB Mentoring Coordinator for our district's school-based mentoring program. And it is in this professional role that I'm here this morning. I'm also honored to be here with my good friends and colleagues, Chad Butt. He introduced himself earlier as the Executive Director of Mobius, Vermont's mentoring partnership, and Gabriella Tufo-Strauss, who is the volunteer coordinator for the King Street Youth Center in Burlington. And one of her many professional roles in her work is overseeing the community-based mentoring program at King Street. And my message is brief, but most sincere. On behalf of the over 150 school and community-based mentoring programs in the state of Vermont, please know how grateful we are to all of you for the work that you do in supporting those programs. Some of the work you do directly helps our programs, funding, and advocacy. Other work you may do appears more indirect or subtle, but please know it is just as valued. Each time you share a personal story, for example, about mentors in your own lives, or perhaps even better, how you have learned from young people in our Vermont communities, we all benefit. It is the belief in the program that I coordinate, SB Mentoring, that mentors learn just as much from our young people, our mentees, as they learn from us. And just as a quick aside, I cannot think of a more fitting day for me to be here giving that message, given what we just witnessed in the other room, and Rebecca's own words. We also thank you most sincerely for helping all of us erase any inappropriate and inaccurate stigma attached to mentoring programs. Again, in SB Mentoring, we don't just say, but we know that our young people in the program are, in fact, our leaders, our young leaders. Their role, their commitment to the program, their ideas, and the activities and conversations they have with their mentors weekly help ensure that our program is sustainable, has mindful growth, and is meaningful for our students, our adults, and our community. My words may reflect SB Mentoring, but please know I offer them in honor of all the wonderful young people and adults involved in mentoring programs throughout Vermont. Mentoring makes a difference. We all need mentors in our lives, people who support us, believe in us, cheer us on. I could never get through a day without my own mentors. January, as you may know, is National Mentoring Month, and I'm proud and excited to share with you that Vermont's mentoring programs have countless opportunities for celebration during this month. I had hoped to bring a slip with Mobius's website and Twitter account and Facebook account, but they are truly our best resource for learning during the month of January, all the celebrations that are going on. Additionally, I come offering a most sincere invitation to any and all of you to join us at these events of celebration. We feel certain you would be glad you did, and it would be an honor to have you at any of them. Thank you again for this opportunity to speak publicly on behalf of the school and community-based mentoring programs in the state of Vermont, and for your good work for our students, staff members, schools, and communities. We welcome further partnership with all of you and are really open to dialogue at any time. Please know what you do makes a positive difference in the lives of young people. I cannot think of any more worthy work than that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you especially for your compliments to the State Board of Education. We don't often hear that. Are there other members of the public? Jeff Francis. So if you, Jeff, you want to start by thanking us too, that might be appropriate.
That is how I wanted to start. I'm Jeff Francis. I'm the Executive Director of the Vermont School Superintendents Association. I took note of the fact that you had 1 minute left for this portion of the agenda and thought I'd take the opportunity. And believe it or not, I did want to start with expressions of appreciation to the State Board of Education and to Secretary Holcomb. And the reason is because I think that we are about to embark on perhaps one of the more dynamic public policy journeys in education that I have encountered in my 16 years in the position as Executive Director of the Superintendents Association. And as we prepare to do that, I wanted to speak about the importance of teamwork, and I wanted to convey to the State Board of Education and to the Secretary of Education that while we are willing participants and eager to engage in this discourse, we also intend to rely on you. I think that Secretary Holcomb has done as good a job as can be done in framing the challenges that face public education in Vermont right now. And I think that the framing of those challenges should be the context by which we evaluate the proposals that are likely to now come forth with great velocity and great volume. And I believe that the potential exists for us to go down side roads, and I think that we should avoid that temptation. I think that the main focus in Vermont right now has to do with the best possible utilization of dollar and personnel resources and the best possible utilization of our collective wisdom to shape the public policies of the future. I had no knowledge that the folks from Mobius would speak here this morning, but I think it's a great indicator of all that we try to do in public education. So if we think about our agenda for personalized learning, dual enrollment, and early college, if we think about programs that are so important to the services that we provide our children, like mentoring and after-school programs, if we think about the need to upgrade the physical condition of the school buildings in the state of Vermont, we need to, in an era where resources are so hard to come by, find the space to do those things. So I believe that the focus on the part of the legislature should be to prioritize initiatives that hold the most promise for addressing rising costs and increasing inequity. And I think that those should be the filters by which we evaluate every proposal. And I'm looking forward to working with the State Board, the General Assembly, members of my association, other professional organizations to make sure that we emerge, I think, in what should be the very near future with a new public policy construct for public education in Vermont. I think that the action needs to be deliberate, focused, and near immediate. So I just wanted to leave you with those words as we all prepare for what I think
that's very fitting, and I'm glad you've done it, because I agree with you that I think we're on the cusp of some very exciting things to happen in the educational world in Vermont. And I think it's very important that the state board, the agency, and the professional, I'm not going to list all the professional organizations, but certainly yours, that we work together. And I think we've had that in mind as we've adopted our legislative agenda, and I think I can speak for the board, full board on this and say we're ready to go and ready to work with all of you as we have in the past. So I'm encouraged.
Right, as am I, and I know that you are, and I'm looking forward to it. Thank you.
Other members of the public that wish to speak? Okay, we'll move on. We're on the consent agenda. Is there a motion from the board? Motion by Bonnie, is it seconded? Seconded by Stacy. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. The ayes have it, and we've approved the consent agenda. Are there updates from board members? Bill?
I'll defer to Sean Marie.
No, we'll go next.
Okay. NASB Governmental Affairs Committee had a telephone meeting, and we talked about E-rate budget, ESEA, and teacher prep rules. Two things I would mention here is ESEA expect Senator Lamar Alexander to come out fast and watch for devolving of the federal role into more of a state role kind of thing. What that will be, we don't know, but there will be a whole lot on waivers, a lot of anxiety about that. The SIG, school improvement grants, and the race to the top look like they're going to be out of the picture. And I don't know that that affects us as much as it's going to affect other states, but expect a lot of change, and I think there's some opportunity here for us to do what we want to do on assessment and accountability. The teacher preparation rules. That is, after 3 years of hibernation has awokened or whatever, and new rules are put out, and the big thing here is evaluation of teachers by test scores. This is going to be a very volatile situation. I don't know, Rebecca, whether you folks are looking at that, whether we should be doing something with this. There's going to be, the 60-day comment period has started, but what's going to come out of that, I don't know. I'm fearful that they will just drive on through with the rules. That's it.
Thank you. Sean Marie.
Well, actually, what I'd like to do is, I was not able to get to the standards board last meeting, and Jay happens to be here, and the streamlined version of the licensing rules has passed. So I was wondering if we might defer to Jay to give us a, did I say that correctly?
Perfectly, Sean.
Oh, then he doesn't need to.
You want to give us a quick overview of where you are, or is it?
Just really quickly,
Why don't you, will you please come to the front table? And just for the record, just say your name again, please.
Jay Hoffman. I serve in the committee on the professional standards, and we're really working busy right now trying to prioritize endorsement renewals, and so we're lining up what are the most critical needs right now in renewing endorsements. Regarding the teacher licensing, we have passed a streamlined version, and the one piece to it is the reflection piece as we try to draw educators to look at the progressions. And as we know, the progressions, they're really a lens through which we look at the standards, the Vermont core standards for professional educators, for educators. The progressions help us to see where we're at on a continuum of skill. And that reflection piece, some call it a mini assessment, just simply helps educators to unpack the progressions. What does it look like to be proficient at a particular core standard? That's the key to it all, to maintain that ability for educators to reflect in regards to the standards. So it's a very intentional piece to help them really see where they're at in regard to the standards. And that's probably the biggest update I can give you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And then Krista and I went on a well, actually it wasn't sponsored by NASB. We were contacted through NASB to, go ahead.
It was a 2-day conference down in Boston, Rhode Island, looking at deeper learning, and one thing is that word is now embedded, so that deeper learning, I feel like everybody, that is now a new buzzword people are using, and trying to define it was more of the struggle. And I think that was the 2 days, because it seemed like a lot of different learning was then called deeper, and I'm not sure if different is always deeper. So that's the thing. We discussed deeper learning. We met with state board members from Kentucky and West Virginia, and then also stakeholders from other organizations nationally. And we did a tour of the Met, which is a big picture school down in Rhode Island, which is a tech center where students can elect to go, and instead of really focusing on content, it's more skill, and going through various internships based on their interest. We also had the chance to go to Codman Academy, which is in Dorchester, Massachusetts, and Codman was much more regimented with content, and really focused on the humanities being taught together, and then also STEM being taught together, and putting those two together, and then having experiences with, once they master that content, so 2-week experiences, and then internships. And they do various things like having summer requirements that within 4 years they have to do 2 summer programs. It could be doing Shakespeare in the Park, or it could be an internship at a lab, whatever that is, but requiring those entrance.
Don't forget the 6 days a week.
Oh yes, and they go to school six days a week. I know, I told my students and they were horrified. They said you shouldn't go to that school ever again, because they're like, don't get any ideas.
It is a charter school.
It is a charter school. And so looking at these different ways of setting up schools and different ways of learning, and then just being able to talk with various board members. We also met with the Secretary of Education of Massachusetts, and then the Commissioner of Education of Rhode Island, and heard a little of their thoughts.
And the both commissioners of education spoke very highly of Vermont and
Rebecca.
and Rebecca, especially the outgoing secretary in Massachusetts. And the NASB put out a study, or one of their booklets. What do they call the booklets? An in-depth look at deeper learning. I guess it was 6 months ago. And one of the other things that I would like to do at a later date is NASB gave me some information for the board on ways they can help us with communication, with maybe synthesizing the EQS into sort of a more layman's term document. That's something they may be able to help with. Krista and I met with some serious funders who Krista had a wonderful idea, who we'd like to run by Rebecca, about bringing teachers in on a grant to try and help bolster what happens in all the schools. I guess, would that be a fair way to say it?
Yeah, yeah. To offer fellowships for current teachers.
So we have some ideas we'd like to talk to you about.
Fantastic.
So
that's for a subsequent meeting,
Yeah.
you'll meet with Rebecca and come back to us subsequently?
That's great.
Other members of the board that wish to, yes?
Just very quickly, so Katie Michaels is in the audience. She's a student from South Burlington. She's joining us today. I just wanted to introduce her. She's going to be in Montpelier this whole next session. She's doing an internship, and so you'll see a lot of her down in Montpelier. So she's really interested in policy and in politics, and she served as a page last year, and she's really hoping to hopefully go up to the Senate, so not the Senate of Vermont, but federal, and be a page there also. So Katie Michaels is joining us, and just if you see her in Montpelier, please engage her and help her out, and just in this journey, she's really interested in policy.
What's the internship?
Internship is she's going to be working at for a lobbyist group and working in committee hearings and taking notes and going back and working on looking at public interest groups and looking at interest groups in general and exploring their role in policymaking.
welcome.
Yeah.
Any other comments or reports from board members? Okay. I've got a couple of things. I thought it was noteworthy. I get a fair amount of correspondence in between meetings, and I usually just address it, and there's rarely an occasion to bring it before a board meeting. But I got two pieces this month that I thought you might want to know about it. I got a letter from the chair of the New Hampshire Board of Education, actually a long two-page letter complimenting us on our position on assessment and test scores and telling us what they're doing in New Hampshire and inviting us to work with them. So I found that interesting. And for the first time, as chair of the State Board of Education, I got a letter from the town of Chester, signed by all 5 select people, saying it's high time that we do something about our property taxes in Vermont. And they take note that they usually collect 95% of their assessed taxes in a given year, and last year it went down to 91%, substantially increasing their taxes that were not paid. So I just found it interesting that a town was contacting the Board of Education as opposed to going through their normal channels. So just a couple of things that I thought you ought to be aware of. Lastly,
Have you made those available?
I haven't, but I have, we can make copies, and I think my response is is attached as well. I want to take a couple minutes and talk about the next 2 meetings. Historically, I guess it hasn't happened every year, but a number of years, we've hosted a legislative breakfast in January. However, we tentatively have ourselves scheduled to appear in South Royalton in January. You may remember that there's a fairly substantial issue that will be on the table from that area. So I bring this up to ask the board if, A, do you want to have a legislative breakfast? And if so, can we wait till February to do it?
What if we had South Royalton come to us?
I think the thinking was that it would be an overture for us to go there, given, the tense, controversial issue of it, that it might be better that we're there, but I guess we're not locked in.
How far is it from Montpelier?
South Royalton?
South Royalton, it's 45 minutes.
45 minutes. Well, because typically we have our winter meetings in Montpelier.
Yes.
Yes, okay. Just checking to make sure I was correct about that.
But maybe it was scheduled in South Burlington, keeping in mind for the first time some of the folks that live in southern Vermont.
Who?
Stacy.
I'd say that I think that last year one of the things we were wrestling with was being able to be responsive to what was happening in the legislature, because it was happening so fast, and then we only had our meetings every month. But I think what's appealing maybe about waiting till February is a lot will have happened, and that might be a really good time to have a set meeting to be engaged versus You know, clearly just looking at everybody's agenda, legislative agenda from all the different groups, they'll have a lot starting in January, and maybe February is a good time for us to.
Things will be ripening, if that's the right word, by then.
Ripening.
And they'll ripen a little further that last week in April, first week in May. Bill?
I was thinking that after the committees are appointed, this would give the legislative committee or individuals or members of the board a chance to talk privately with some of the new leadership. Because, as Jeff said, there's going to be a lot of things that are in play that some of them look very promising, others may not prove to be as promising. But that would give us a chance to lay the groundwork a little bit before the legislative meeting.
So you're suggesting February and
February will work, I think.
Well, unless I hear objection, then I think that's what we'll tentatively try to do. And my suggestion would be, I think for the first time last year, we actually met in the State House as opposed to across the street.
I like that.
Which I think worked better, and I think we had more people attending as a result of that. So maybe give Carol a call and see how she arranged all that, and you can follow up on that.
State or state?
State.
Room 9.
Capital.
The building with a big dome on it, and this kind of goldish.
Oh, in Montpelier?
Okay. Speaking of the legislature, sorry?
I'm just thinking when school break is in February.
It's the last.
So
It's last week sometimes, in Southern, sometimes it's that week. Oh, that would play, no, because we're going to be in January.
Legislative update from Jill and Rebecca.
Do you want to start with state and then we can talk to federal? Okay.
Good morning, Jill Remick from the Agency of Education. I think it's safe to say we'll be approaching this legislative session with more of a filter of how we're going to make judgments on or participate in conversations of things that come up. We're certainly glad to support the administration's suggestion on a moratorium on any new legislation that would not bring about any kind of efficiencies in operations for school districts. We'll also be viewing those proposals through the lens of, are we really able to ensure that these things can truly be done in an equitable way for all Vermont students, not just for some? Will it include any additional burden on the agency, fiscal or otherwise? Would add any additional burdens on local school districts or supervisory unions? Does it include any requirements that are not currently allowable under existing law or rule? And also, are there things that can come up during this session that we might be able to help leverage more of a focus on SU level operations and measures? We're really focusing on identifying quality and how we can measure quality at the agency to ensure that those kids in all the schools are getting what they need. So it's more that we want to be a part of a conversation at the table when these things come up. We don't have an active list of things that we want to be proposing. We definitely want to be sure we're a part of the conversation on the topics that we've been hearing come up over the last couple weeks and couple of days. I believe I sent to you folks electronically, and you probably got it otherwise as well, the 8-page report from the Speaker of the House's ad hoc group on ed funding. That was specific to education funding, but it certainly had a lot of things that had a direct impact on the agency and the state board. Some of the things that were in there that we definitely want to be a part of talking about further are also things that the board yourselves have included in your agenda, such as phasing out the phantom student hold harmless provision, considering eliminating small schools grant unless it's deemed geographically necessary. Again, that would be a request of the agency to determine what that means. How do we really direct resources at the schools that need the help the most, especially those who have a high proportion of students in poverty? Another piece that came out of that conversation from that group was the increasing incentives to form RED. Certainly you folks see those come forward each month, and are there things we can do to encourage that kind of supportive conversation? And then we also still have a list of miscellaneous items. They had sat in the bills for the last 2 years in the session, and unfortunately they took the wrong train to the final destination. Really minor pieces, but that are important to ensure that legislation is in line with current best practices, reflective of what you folks passed in the education quality standards. Right now that section in Title 16 still refers to school quality standards, and it has a lot of other outdated language. So we will have pieces such as that we're putting forth. But beyond that, it's really more of a ensuring that what does happen this session is really going to bring about the best things for students and districts. If that's fair to say.
And just to add a couple thoughts to what Bill's already shared, we are expecting quite an active session in Congress, starting with ESEA reauthorization, and probably what typically happens short after that, IDEA as well. So we are already in full bore on that. In terms of what seem to be primary concerns, it doesn't look like there's any effort or interest in moving away from annual testing. There is some interest in moving towards more of states' autonomy in terms of developing state-level accountability models. In our conversations, and we've had the opportunity to have a couple conversations with congressional staffers, what we've been trying to do is help illuminate how much Vermont just isn't captured by current federal policy and how inconsistent federal policy is with really what we're trying to do and what our commitments are. And the two big areas that we're focusing on are what we call our small n problem, which is use of any measure for consequential purposes is inappropriate in a place where you have very small numbers as the basis, whether it's SLOs or test scores. When you have very small numbers, those just are not reliable measures. So you need to have a more nuanced approach to talking about what school quality is and documenting opportunities to learn. And certainly since No Child Left Behind was passed, our understanding of what reliability is and an appropriate sample size is has also evolved. And some of the recent research suggests it's much larger than what was initially enshrined in both state practice and the federal policy, which raises really interesting concerns for a state like ours. And they were struck, for example, when we reported that if we reported our test data the way Massachusetts does, that we would have suppressed data in 80% of our schools. So when you're focused on subgroup analysis, we don't have the capacity to do that in any meaningful way in most of our individual schools. So if we really are concerned about our equity goals, we have to find other more sophisticated ways of trying to approach that goal. And then the other is to really help clarify Vermont's strong commitment to equity and show how that equity can be documented in other ways. And just one example, they're very interested in looking at not just equity and outcomes, but also equity and fiscal resources. We have a statewide funding plan, which is the most progressive in the country. It really equalizes proportionally the ability to raise revenue, and it also weights for students who are more expensive to educate. So it's a very progressive formula. I think if anything, the lesson of Vermont is that's not enough, that really closing opportunity gaps goes far beyond what we're already doing, even as the most equitable system. But it also will be truthfully impossible for us to document some of the kinds of fiscal indicators that they're trying to do because of the way we choose to fund education in any meaningful way. So on the fiscal front, we're going to have another garbage in, garbage out situation. And so we'll have to do a lot of work to comply, but it really won't be giving us the data that we want. We've been trying to make that clear to them as well. And one of the things that if we are pushed into a system, we may need to negotiate something around using some of our data maybe at the SU level, but acknowledging that at the SU level, that's not a governing unit in many contexts, so that the application of consequences or sanction at that level may not be appropriate. So we're really trying to push that conversation, expect it to happen very quickly. At the end of the day, I suspect it will be made, if it is favorably made to Vermont, it will be because of sort of a states' rights push in Congress and not because of the peculiarities of Vermont. With respect to teacher preparation, I won't belabor it too much, but all the same issues apply there. Where we find it undoable and ill-advised. It's also ironic in that most of the educators that we educate and educate very well end up going into other states. So for our programs to demonstrate the value added of their graduates in the programs to which they send their students, when you think about the implications of this nationwide, we're fundamentally talking about creating a national database of student data that's linked, that we could use to track hundreds of thousands of educators across different states and back to individual programs. We would still have tremendous issues with reliability of that data, so we wouldn't trust it. And I also don't know what the political appetite is for a statewide database of student scores for the purpose of evaluating teachers, because that's really the only way I can think of feasibly to do this. So we expect that to come up. We have found that this is something that the administration is pretty focused on, and we don't hear a lot of flexibility yet in the configuration of it. I don't want to belabor that issue too much. Legislative, anything else on the federal level that we should speak to?
federal level, no, not that I can.
Okay, all right, we're going to come back to some of these issues in the reports.
And I forgot to mention, when you folks come back in January, you'll have probably been inundated by legislative reports that we as the agency have to work on or be a part of, and we're happy to talk about any of those. The one I'm thinking of is the one that the Joint Fiscal Office has contracted with that's studying the use of paraprofessionals, and they've actually been doing site visits across the state. So they'll have a pretty in-depth study. It's not finished yet, but that would certainly be something that we
When's
could bring
it
to you
due?
folks. I think it's January 15th. I was trying to find my note. Most of them are the 15th. Yes, the 15th of January.
You, in the past, I assume you're the legislative person in the agency still.
The closest thing to it, yes.
No one wears one hat anymore.
I understand. And you've, in the past, you've done a great job of keeping us informed, and, things can happen, and we obviously can't wait for each monthly meeting. So whatever you can do to keep us informed as things are happening, it's greatly appreciated.
Okay, will do.
And as you know, Bill is our chair of our legislative committee, so particularly Bill needs to be kept up to date. So whatever, I realize you don't work for us, but whatever you can do to keep us informed would be terrific.
Sure thing.
And I think that's probably more important this year, as Jeff Francis was laying out, than it has been in the past.
Right.
So, thank you in
Sure
advance.
thing. Right, and as an example, that recommendations from that ad hoc committee certainly have a lot of responsibilities for the state board, so we'll be keeping a close eye on that for you.
Right.
Yep, sounds good.
I can see that thing getting really crazy, going back and forth, changing directions. This week, this idea is hot. Next week, something else is hot.
Well, that's why you're chair of this committee, and you're the one that's going to determine whether that's real or if that's just a temporary thing that we don't need to worry about.
Slickly done, Mr. President.
In other words, Bill will be to blame. Any other questions or comments on the legislative update? All right.
I would like to go back to that teacher thing a little bit. You just said it was undoable, and I think it is too. And one thing that I didn't hear is the privacy concerns with that database of having all the kids' data in the nation attached to all the teachers in the nation. Pulling that off and then protecting that data, we're going to make Sony look like they had good security.
I think the challenge is, I don't think they have thought through the practical aspects of attempting to implement this. The problem is that we can't compel states to send back data for individual students of individual teachers. So the only way to, do you understand it? I don't think they've actually thought through how you could actually even execute what they're telling us we have to do, because it makes no sense. As a state, given the fact that we used to have just 2 Common Core tests, now we're looking at a number of them, it's not even just simply getting back value-added scores from different states. Could be 10 different states for any given cohort. It's also figuring out how to link or equate those test scores across systems. And the problem with any of the growth scores, which is what they're talking about, is that you're not just measuring how the students score, which is a substantial quantity. It's differences in how students score, which is a minuscule quantity. So if you are interested in all statistics, anytime you have any error in that measurement, the error will swamp the effect. They won't be able to detect an effect. This is just a statistical and logistical nightmare that I don't think anyone's thought through. That doesn't usually preclude legislation. So I think we have to be anticipating it. I don't know how we could implement it, especially in a state like Vermont, which is fairly small, has some wonderful programs, and our graduates are recruited around the country. I don't know how we're going to be able to track that back. The other piece of it is that, I'll just leave it there. But yes, absolutely. There are a whole host of issues around it.
Yes, there are. It's kind of scary.
I find it it's a very concerning trend, and over and beyond the fact that we educate our students for more of those. It's not clear to me, particularly with new teachers, that when they go into a school, to what extent will we be picking up the effect of the preparation program, and what extent will we be picking up the effect of the school environment and culture into which that teacher has been placed. And I find this particularly challenging from an equity point of view, because we want our well-educated Vermont graduates to go out and teach in high-need schools, and we are setting up a teacher preparation and teacher evaluation system which penalizes teachers for
Yes.
seeking the most talented teachers out.
Yes.
And I find this ethically challenging, because we are discouraging people and incentivizing teachers to take a hit for doing the right thing, and I find that very discouraging.
Yes.
If you really want to know my opinion.
Well said.
Just as truly, when we, even in the state of Vermont, I mean, one of our concerns about using value-added models is we know that they do pick up some effect, but teaching is incredibly complex, and we don't want to do anything that's going to discourage our most qualified, most experienced teachers from really teaching in the most challenging systems, because those kids need the skilled teachers the most.
Other questions or comments on the legislative update? If not, we'll move on to the Secretary's report.
Well, let's continue with the issue of education equity. This year, the U.S. Department of Education is going to require us to complete a new plan to promote educator equity across the state and submit this to the U.S. Department of Education. This will be a required plan as part of Title I. They give us Title I. They're free to set the conditions under which we accept Title I. It doesn't come with new money to implement, so any money that has to be used to actually implement this plan will have to come out of our Title I allocation, which may influence both how the agency has to allocate staff time, but also what resources are available for discretionary purposes in the field. The plan has to address differences or comparisons of two equity groups, one high wealth versus low wealth population schools, so looking at high income and low income schools, and also low minority versus high minority population schools. Those are the two equity subgroups that they're particularly focusing on in this plan. And it has to look at equity in terms of three minimum indicators, and that's exposure to inexperienced educators, exposure to unqualified teachers, those would be teachers who aren't certified, for example, or provisionally certified, and exposure to out-of-field educators, so science teachers teaching math, for example. That's because all three of those things have been associated in the literature with student performance. We know that teaching is such a challenging profession. No one does it well in the first 2 years. You get better through practice. So that if students in high poverty schools are disproportionately taught by first and second year teachers, it is probable that they're not getting the benefit of skill and practice. And likewise, we know that when teachers know their content deeply, understand the structure of knowledge, they're able to leverage that to really push kids to think conceptually in ways that you can't if you don't know your content. The good news is that this aligns and can be aligned if we're aggressive with a core goal of the State Board of Education as well as the agency, which is addressing these gaps and opportunities for students to learn. We think every child deserves a high-quality teacher, and we'll be working to put this proposal together. And if the board would like to be involved or see some draft or some work around this at any point, just let us know and we'll find a way to share it with you as we move forward. I wanted to also just heads you up, because you may hear about it from some of your constituencies, that there was a recent change in policies with respect to teacher retirement, and I'll show you a graphic that shows you part of what motivated this change. But now, historically, federally funded positions have not been contributing into the teacher retirement plan, and that means effectively that the teacher retirement plan is underfunded for Vermont teachers. So as of this year, we have to make, all districts have to, and anyone using federal funds to fund federal positions, these could be Title I, whatever IDA, they have to be making contributions into the Vermont State Teachers Retirement System to cover the amount, the actuarially recommended contribution that wasn't paid for through employee withholdings if they weren't state employees or school district employees. So this will be experienced in a reduction in discretionary resources. If you had a teacher and $30,000 in Title I resources, you now have to pay an additional 12.8% for that teacher to cover that retirement contribution, which means that, for example, you would have less than $30,000 in discretionary revenues to spend on Title I activities.
Is it just title, or does it include special ed?
It's any federal funded position. So we're still working through the logistics of how we play that out.
12.8%?
Yes. And it's, yes.
Ooh,
exactly.
That hurts.
It does hurt. Well, but it also is critical because retirement funds are a commitment, and we are going to have to pay it. It's an awful lot cheaper and efficient to pay it as you go than to try to make up the gap. We can't afford not to have a fully funded pension system.
How far does that go back, or does it start as of now?
It starts now, moving
Oh,
forward.
it doesn't go back.
How much we got in Title I?
In
50
addition,
million?
new hires, there's a one-time, I mean, there's not, it's a, not a one-time, it's an ongoing thousand, I think it's
Yeah.
1,094 contribution that goes, yes, moving forward for new hires.
How will that, will that disproportionately affect our neediest schools then, in their town's budgets? Is that what
Well,
that's saying?
they would argue that that you've gotten a free pass and you're now paying the full cost of a teacher in those systems off your Title I funding.
The answer is yes, it would have impact on the neediest
Right,
schools.
Yes, it would.
I mean, I think that
Because they're the ones who receive more of the disproportionate federal funds.
I would not be surprised if that was highly misunderstood in the general public conversation without some real clarity. I mean, I can hear the.
We got this information Thursday.
Yeah.
And we were in the business of pushing it out right now.
Right,
And
okay.
we, Aaron Broder has been actively working to make sure business managers are on top of this before budgets are finalized.
I think if there's like some key phrases that that constituents could have that would help line up, so we're all speaking the same language, like I certainly know that.
I
would
can
be
share
important to be able to
I can
say.
share the communication he put together for the field with the
If
state
that's
board.
appropriate for us, that'd be great.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank
I
you.
think we're all interested in making sure this is done as seamlessly as possible.
Mm-hmm.
We know budgets are very tight. We also know we have an obligation to fund a pension system if we have
Mm-hmm.
one, or a retirement system if we have one. So it's the right thing to do. I just think it's going to be painful.
Mm-hmm.
And it reflects the reality that we are very, very tight right now.
Okay, John Marie.
Yep.
So the title funds, so the largest recipient of the title funds will have the largest impact on their budgets.
Yes. Yes.
And typically
What
what
it's
you're saying
reducing
is
is
the,
flexibility. It's
Right.
saying that part of hiring someone on a federal, using federal funds to hire a person, part of that commitment is also committing to Vermont teacher retirements.
so in other words,
Because we're creating staff positions, but we're not funding their retirement, even though we're committing to pay it. So we aren't paying our full obligation for those positions.
well, I mean, I see, I guess what's interesting is that we haven't been.
Right, we got a free pass for years, because no one did
Right,
it.
so in other words, is how you contribute when you have an employee to Social Security and to, it's just the cost of doing business.
It's the cost of doing business. The cost of doing business just went up.
Okay, so
Yeah.
I have a question. So I'm trying to follow this through in terms of our SU. So we put to rest and approved our SU central office budget, which has centralized special ed in it. Probably-
I'm a little nervous about the special ed, because I don't want to speak out of turn and set everyone crazy. Can I make a suggestion that I know Aaron Broder has been in active communication with all the business managers immediately, and he has been sort of telling them this is coming. It may be that some of the special educators, in part because of the way we fund, that they're already covered. It's particularly the positions that have come up in particular are the title positions in the consolidated federal programs. I just want to, before you know or make estimates about your own impact locally, I think it makes sense to look at the memo that came out and ask your business manager how they've been paying for the positions that are already in place. So I don't want to,
Okay.
yeah, I'll send that out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, Steve.
Steve Dale from the School Boards Association. Just for some information, this issue grew out of the discussion last year about the unfunded obligation for retired teacher health care benefits, and it was part of the master plan for covering that need. And this issue was debated for the first time. We had serious concerns about the $1,000 surcharge on all new teachers. However, we as an association strongly supported this change, as painful as it will be.
Absolutely.
The fact is, the state of Vermont for years has been incurring an obligation using federal funds and then needing to pay retirement benefits on into the future out of state dollars, which doesn't make any sense. If we're going to use substantial amounts of federal dollars, we ought to be funding that long-term retirement benefit out of federal dollars. So it's a huge adjustment. It's a painful adjustment, but we all ought to be ready to make it, because sooner or later we're going to have to pay that obligation, and we should be making that adjustment now, as hard as it is.
Thank you, Steve. It is the right thing to do, even though it's coming at a hard time. In terms of just on that note, you know, I thank Jeff for his, I feel like you stole my stump speech. I think this is a moment of extraordinary opportunity. It's also a moment of challenge. I want to be realistic about that. And as to borrow Jeff's phrase, it's coming at us at great velocity and at great volume. It's coming at us from the federal front. It's coming at us at the state front. It's legislative, it's fiscal, and it's going to be very, very quick, tumultuous, and confusing. And so I think the more that we have coherence and consensus around key priorities, that's going to shape our decision making as we move forward. The agency itself is looking at a 10% cut in our general fund. We're looking at a 20% loss in licensing revenue associated with the rule changes. We are underwater in several divisions, and we are trying to figure out how to do that. We are going to make some very hard decisions in our budget. I'm going to be totally upfront. We're going to say some things and do some things which are going to have to make some people really upset with us. We do not have a choice. We have about 52 positions that are state-funded positions in the agency right now, and just about half of those we estimate are in just keeping the lights on, keeping the money going out, and doing, you know, statutorily mandated things. We're doing everything. We're turning over every rock. We're looking through every single committee we're asked to sit on, every single task force. We're trying to document that time, figure out what we can put aside, what we can't. We're looking at every single grant that we send out, trying to figure out what is done effectively in those grants, more than we could do it in the agency, and what is already addressed elsewhere in the agency, and being very, very mindful of our statutory obligations. The only way I can say it is if you think of us as being in a candy store, we don't have the resources to buy everything on the shelf. We have to make some very hard choices about what we do buy, and no matter what we do, somebody's going to be a little bit sad about that. But we are going to make our commitments consistently to the best of our ability by focusing on sort of core goals. And I think Jeff mentioned some of them. I think they're in your strategic plan, and they certainly are the goals of the governor and the agency, and that is really to focus on providing the highest quality education we can in every single classroom for every single child and for all the learners that we serve, both public and private, both in children and also grown-ups, and to try to systematically address the opportunity gaps, because we feel that's what explains the achievement gap, and to do this in the most affordable and efficient way possible. We cannot afford to take the Mercedes approach when the Honda approach will get us where we need to go. And we're really at that point where we have to ensure that we're targeting every single dollar in the most fiscally effective way possible to achieve those goals of high quality learning and equity of opportunity. So I say that just to tell you that as our budget is finalized, we will be challenging everybody to make some hard choices. We appreciate the state board's efforts to do the same, in particular your negotiations with NASB, because we know that we have a tremendous amount of hard work ahead.
Wait a minute, remember that's our money. That money we saved in NASB is our money, not the agency.
I didn't say I was taking it back. I could have given you a 10% cut. But I think, but I think that we have a tremendous amount of work to do. I think the field needs you right now, and they need you to provide leadership and feedback. And so we just have to have this constant conversation about what we're doing, what the priorities are, and occasionally we may have to leave some good candy on the shelf because we just can't afford it, even if we'd really like it. So that's my secretary's report.
It's uplifting.
I'm optimistic.
So at some point, I realize we have, under the new structure, we probably don't have anything to say about the agency's budget, but at some point, I think the tradition has been that you at least...
It's coming next meeting.
Okay.
I think.
No,
Oh,
we're
no, we
supposed
have
to
to sign,
review
we're
it.
supposed to review it.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, because I think the chair actually signs off on it
Right.
still.
I think
so.
we're still coping. I don't even know if we've got our final targets yet. I think we just got them. So we're going to get that to you as soon as possible.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Sean Marie?
Rebecca, I think most of us got this announcement or letter.
Yeah.
Inauguration presided over by the Vermont Secretary of Education for the Mount Mansfield Modified Union School
yes.
District. Do you know what that means? The inauguration of the...
They're taking the oath,
They're going to crack the bottle on the new ship?
I know I'm invited to convene the meeting, and I'm hoping my statutory role is fairly small, because otherwise we'll be on Rebecca's Rules of Order, not Robert's Rules of Order.
Well, that's an efficient use of your time. So
I'm happy to be there for the duration.
I think it's great that there's an actual celebration.
celebration.
Yes, I mean, I Unfortunately, I can't, I got the same invitation, I can't
Well, I
go.
was
I'm
hoping
planning on
one.
going.
Yay!
Yeah.
You're- you're-
It's nice to show, our hope was to show some support. I think this is a community that's worked very, very
Yes.
hard to expand opportunities for their children, and we wanted to be there for that.
So if you have an opportunity to speak for the state board, please.
You're there for all of us.
Okay.
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 So Jericho's pretty north, isn't it?
Yeah.
See, I need my geography for the north.
Any other questions of Rebecca on her report? If not, we'll move on to agenda item I, discussion of Rule 2240. I think this has come up because in recent times, we've had two post-secondary school applications, new school applications that come before us. And I don't think we really were, even though the agency had done their usual investigation and report, we weren't comfortable in just how, in what position we were in to be able to make a judgment on it. And so, at the last meeting, I believe we decided there was actually a motion to request a rule review of 2240. And I don't know if that means that we're actually going to initiate new rules. But my quick read of this, it looks like these rules were adopted in 1991.
Oh my God, they're ancient.
And then there appear to be some review maybe in 96, because some rules were repealed. My quick read of this is that it didn't seem to be many requirements here. It seemed to be more on, it's just that, this is a registration, as opposed to looking for what the actual quality of your program might be. And I noted, for example, that, you could open your school and run 18 months before you really, so.
Except in the next paragraph, in the same exact heading, it says you can't open your school without applying. So there's contradictions within the rule. So I don't know what we want to do with it.
Well, before I open it up to the board, we were going to get the agency's thoughts on this.
I think part of our hope in having this on the agenda was to get a little more input from the board in terms of what you actually wanted in terms of a rule review or eventually towards rulemaking. And just to put out three things that came up to us in our internal conversations. One, given the age of these rules, does it make sense to look at whether there's research that might inform best practice here? Mm-hmm. Two, does it make sense to see what some of nearby partner states do in terms of approval of post-secondary institutions? And three, I think the piece that has been the most challenging for this board is that these rules were developed in a rule that didn't contemplate virtual universities mm-hmm. and virtual colleges. And we have had the two most recent applications both involve virtual learning or online learning components, which these rules really don't cover. Mm-hmm. So I'm not sure, and I think the discomfort of the board has been in part trying to use rules that don't address the nature and the design of the institutions that are actually coming before you, so that this could be an opportunity to update the rules to reflect best practice in terms of digital and online universities, which seems to be a growing sector of that market.
But back to some of your earlier points, that, I mean, I certainly read these and think they need to be updated, but, we would rely on the agency to supply the proposal. And,
Right.
I don't know that, do you have the staff or the time to do that?
The challenge is that you have one pending request
Yes.
and another that will be back to you in a year. Can we afford not to? Because people have to.
Well-
We may not be able to do it in a timely way. I think what we can do is reach out to other states, find out what current standards are, and try to take advantage of work that's been done in other places that have really thought through what online universities are
Right.
and how you might have some criteria for approval.
In my memory of the EQS rules, it was an 8-month process.
It is an 8-month process, and that might have implications for whether or not you approve programs in the interim.
Yes.
Another thing that, to your earlier points, the cost. I was looking in here, and it seemed pretty minuscule, and especially, do these costs even cover the true costs? And so that's what I thought, even the updating in that
No,
I
they
feel like
don't.
we're taking a hit for the state every time there's an application that we're assuming.
And that worries us because there's now a reciprocity agreement. I would like the board to maybe take a sense of the board whether you want to pursue revision of the updating of the post-secondary approval rules to reflect, what we know about best practice and online learning. And if so, we can go ahead and start doing that work, and we'll start by working through some of our partner states that have already done some work in this area. There are good people out there doing good work. I don't feel like we have to reinvent the wheel. What we could do is take the best work that's out there and then try to use that to, as a basis, and you could modify from there.
Margaret?
And in addition to that, can we put a moratorium on approval of new programs until that rulemaking is complete?
My guess is you could, but that would be a second decision.
Okay.
Yeah, I was going to bring that issue up, but I was going to bring it up under agenda item N later
Yeah.
this afternoon.
Yeah.
Okay. Unless the board members disagree with me, I'll hold off on that part of it until then. Stacey?
I've seen that it would be important to, I think we want to review best practices and what's happening in online learning, but also what's happening I think we need to review what's happening in technology and just make sure that this is written, that we're looking at this in such a way that we're acknowledging that we have no idea what the technology is going to look like in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. So like some of the wording struck me as like the difference between like seat time and proficiency that we're now talking about. This felt like a very seat time document. And I don't know, so probably there is a model out there, hopefully there is, but I would love to see this having enough, like movement to it, that we recognize that this will be, whatever we come up will be out of date if it's written with such. And I'm thinking about in 91, I didn't have email yet, so how much has changed, so.
This is correspondence courses.
Yes,
Right.
I love that.
It might,
They have their
thinking out
license.
loud, it might be helpful if we even put a section at the end requiring a review in, I don't know, 2-3 years or
Right.
something.
Based on technology.
Yes.
Right, based on how.
All right, so I guess I would entertain a motion that we initiate a process led by the agency to propose new post-secondary school licensing.
I'll make that motion, but is it starting is it technically starting the rulemaking process?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Not
I would suggest that we use that moratorium word and put a moratorium particularly on virtual education applications until these rules are brought up to date, until the agency tells us they're okay or proposes recommendations for the rulemaking process.
So you want to do that in 2 separate motions?
I don't care.
I think that's the way it should be done, yeah. And I'm not sure which should come first.
Perry, what was that motion that was just
The one that you
stated?
made?
Yes, the one that I
To initiate a process led by the agency to propose new post-secondary school approval processes.
That was the motion I just suggested.
from last, you're right.
No, that's different than last meeting.
Okay, so I made that motion.
I'll second it.
All right, so the motion is what, Perry?
To initiate a process led by the agency to propose new post-secondary school approval processes.
Okay.
Do we want something about the actual online for the online component?
Well, it's
With
the
a
whole,
fo-
but it's the whole thing.
I think that goes without saying. And Margaret seconded that motion. Is there discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. The ayes have it, and we have begun the process of reviewing Rule 2240. I would suggest that under, Bill, under item N, that we do a general motion on holding up on these things until we get the new rules adopted.
Well, I can go either way. I just didn't want it to, for the people with Royal University, I wouldn't want them to feel that they were being singled out, that this is a general kind of thing.
Okay, why don't you, go ahead.
So I think, my thinking on it is exactly that, but on the same token, this does apply to post-secondary, and I think we could put a moratorium on post-secondary schools, because the rules, I mean, even for post-secondary building schools are very out of date, and this is incredibly redundant. And so I don't see why we would limit it to virtual schools as opposed to putting a moratorium on post-secondary schools till the rules have been.
If someone has a motion, we'll certainly entertain it now.
I guess I'd ask the secretary if she feels that that's what could create a problem.
I don't see a lot of requests for post-secondary approval. I may be mistaken. I'm trying to think of, the ones we've been receiving are online. I think we actually have a challenge in the state with an excess of seats in the post-secondary system. So it's that's a difficult market to enter if you're doing bricks and mortar right now.
So it wouldn't, by making it an inclusive versus just a specific.
I can't think of any, I mean, you could revisit it if one came to us, but I can't think of any that have come to us or anyone who's reached out, and I'll check that when I get that.
Okay, so we could do it on all of them.
Yeah.
On
Place
all
moratorium on all new requests for
And
post-secondary.
we can work to do this as quickly as possible.
I'm not sure you want to put the word new in there because we do have one pending.
Well, I'm thinking of the people who have to come back for a regular, how often do they have to come back? That was unclear to
There
me.
are, so it's, he's trying to distinguish between people who've already been approved to operate and have to come back for renewal versus people who are seeking initial.
Right.
And there are some of those out there?
There's no one the only initial approval requests we've received that I can think of are 2 onlines in the last year.
Yeah.
This is the new market, and with the new interstate agreement, this is going to be the area where we see. Have we had any others? Do you know?
No, well, no, I had suggested wording for the motion.
Okay.
Please.
Okay. Thank you.
Place a moratorium on all requests for post-secondary school approvals that are not renewals of existing approvals.
I think that's what I said.
Yeah.
Bill made a motion to, and it's been seconded. Any other discussion?
Seconded by whom?
Kristen.
By Kristen.
Can
Sorry.
we put the number of the rule in?
2240.
Did you mean to include that, Bill?
Yes.
That's friendly.
Okay. All right, all those in favor of the moratorium, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say no. And we have completed that. Moving on to pre-K rulemaking.
She's in person.
Glad to see you here.
She's in the flesh.
Karen Edwards, Agency of Education. I'll start. There's quite a bit that's happening in the Act 166 world. First, just to make sure everybody knows that Vermont did receive a pre-K expansion grant. It's $7 million a year, and the total should be $33 million if it stays funded and we stay, doing what we're supposed to do. So that's pretty exciting. This is a direct
Congratulations.
service grant, which means 95% of the funds go directly to service providers. So, starting with that. Act 166 has taken a few side trips since I last talked to you. There was guidance or a memo granting relief to school districts, allowing them to put off implementation for a year if they choose to, and if they don't choose to, they can go ahead and do that. And this was really had to do with the timing of it all. It was impossible to have rules in place in order to make it reasonable for people in schools to do budgeting. So that's happening. We don't really know yet how many schools are going ahead, but we do know that quite a few of them are going to go ahead anyway. The draft rules went to ICAR on December 8th and were approved with just some minor changes in the papers that were filed. There were no changes to the rules. So there's 15 days before they can be filed with the Secretary of State, and then they will go out for comment. If all things can get resolved within those 15 days. There's a couple of unresolved issues that have to do with supplanting and Head Start and Title I, and those are being worked through by the attorneys. This changed the guidance packet we had ready to go out for a number of reasons. So the work group that is working on this will be putting out, hopefully next week, those pieces of the guidance that aren't effective. So the pre-qualification application for programs that want to be pre-qualified will go out hopefully next week. And the guidance on for schools who want to expand programs will also go out. And there are situations where it's fine, you have an 8-hour program and you want to expand it to a 10-hour program, and this won't require a new classroom or a new teacher. They can just go ahead and do that. There'll have to be an application process if it's a larger expansion. And then the criteria for the pre-kindergarten regions will be the next thing to be worked on, and that has to go to the legislature on January 15th, but it should be ready to go out at that point. So that's what's been going on.
They've been very busy.
Jean-Marie.
The regions, are they going to be or they're going to be prescribed in the report? Or they're going to be recommended?
What we're bringing to the legislature is our recommendation for how they will be, what are the criteria and how will they be approved. So the law says that school boards initiate these. There are factors that have to be considered, and there's a review process. So it will be, it will be initiated. The law says at a district level. We had suggested strongly that it be considered at a supervisory union level.
So that they're not bigger districts than that. You're looking at districts of.
I think that
of that. I guess I don't want to no controversy here, but the size of that region. I mean, AHS regions are bigger than. I mean, they're sort of countywide. Mm-hmm. So I'm wondering, are you looking at smaller, like supervisory union sizes? And is it the agency that's recommending it?
No.
Or is it a committee?
In statute, it's up to the
school boards.
They can set it at their school district level, which can be at the town level. We are encouraging them to think bigger than that.
Okay.
Yep. And we already know there are 3 SUs, 3 of the Franklins have already made arrangements to share pre-K, their pre-K work. So I'm assuming that they're going to request a region that has those 3 supervisory unions.
Bill.
I don't know if this has to do with the rules or whether it has to do with the laws or whether I just need to get my information level up, but I'm concerned about equity.
That was.
You two over there, you behave yourselves. Do we have a situation where there are unequal opportunities for early education in different parts of the state? Do we have it that certain providers would be catering more to low-income people, whereas higher-income people would have a different range of choices? Do we have a situation in which the 10-hour rule is
Exacerbating inequity.
available to poorer children, but more affluent children would have a more full-day program, full-week program? Do we have transportation problems that influence equity? There's a whole potpourri of questions here on implementation that I don't have answers to.
And I think those are come from the law rather than the rules, because the rules just reflect the law. But yes, I think many of those things are true, because although this does guarantee any child in the state, any 3, 4, or 5-year-old not yet in kindergarten, access to 10 hours a week, which many of them don't have now. So it does create a more equitable situation in some ways. But the reality is that, the parents who have the means are the ones who are more likely to be able to get their children into a program that, is a higher quality program, someplace where they can drive their child to. It does bring up all those questions.
Is legislature looking at this issue or set of issues?
Not that we're aware of.
No, not that we were aware of.
So, do the rules need to come back to us at some point?
Yes, so 15 days from the 8th, so the 23rd, If all goes well, they'll be filed with the Secretary of State, and then we'll have a comment period, and that, Rebecca, I believe, is being worked out in terms of regional meetings that you're going to attend? Is that
As many of them as I can.
as many as you
what the
can?
legislature demands.
And then it comes back to this board for discussion, and then it comes to the board for approval, and then it goes to LCAR, the Legislative Committee on Administrative Rules.
So it comes back here twice more?
If you want it to. You could also, you could choose to discuss and vote at the same meeting.
Don?
Well, if I might, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a comment.
Sure.
I would like to commend Karen and the secretary for the very positive manner which they dealt with this issue. I think that all of you are aware that there was a lot of pushback in the Senate last year. It didn't look like it was going to move, even though we had it for over a year. A little mutiny by a few members brought it to the floor, and we passed it. But we did not change one comma, any punctuation marks, any dates, and that really, in some ways, put us in an awkward situation. So I want to commend them publicly for the fine work they've done, and the children of Vermont will benefit. Some a little later than maybe we had hoped, but that's fine. They're going to benefit. So thank you for letting me speak, but people did great work.
Thank you. One thing that we do have an opportunity with this new grant to improve both quality and equity, because the grant is focused on 4-year-olds in poverty. So we'll be reporting on how many new 4-year-olds at or below 200% of the federal poverty level participate in programs. And it's about creating new slots for those children, but also raising quality according to the criteria that's in the grant. And that includes things like full-day programs, licensed teachers, teachers being paid at the same level as school teachers within that area. So it does have, I think that, I think we've got a great, with Act 66 and the 2 grants going on, I think we have a real chance to improve the quality of pre-K education in the state.
Jeff, did you have a...
Sure. Jeff Francis, Vermont Superintendent Association. I couldn't agree with Senator Collins more with regard to accolades for the agency, staff, Rebecca Holcomb. I wanted to make sure that we didn't miss the opportunity to also thank Allie Richards, who has just done incredible work as a person who's had the opportunity to witness how this has all unfolded. So I wanted to extend that gratitude as well.
So for the record, we should note that Jeff Francis is in a particularly good mood today. He made 2 positive comments.
I won't deny that.
Usually they're in good mood when they're near retirement.
We're not going there. Rebecca.
And just to add one more comment, one of the things that's also in the grant is some support for building of expertise around braiding of funding. And we are partnering with AHS in a number of components of this grant, and there are ways to figure out how to braid childcare subsidies with pre-K provision to ensure broader, longer access for kids who are eligible, and that's a piece of it. We feel like we can use our resources more efficiently if we can figure out how to pool them across different funding streams.
Yeah. Other questions or comments? Move on to the staffing report.
Carrie, do we have the what do you call it, the overhead projector? Okay, it's not quite set up.
Well, let's take a 5-minute
Okay,
break.
is that I'm back.
Oh, you're back, okay. We'll call on the secretary to give us an update on the staffing report.
Well, just to be clear, this was a response. I think, Krista, you had shared out with the board at the last meeting some of the agency reports that are on our website about staffing levels in different categories. And we are still working with those. One of the things we've also been doing is reaching out to the treasurer's office, because there's some discrepancies between the treasurer's data based on the retirement system and ours, and we're just trying to tease that out. Our data is reported to us by school districts, so it's as accurate as the initial reporting by school districts. So that's helping us tease out where there are discrepancies. And I want to be really clear, any data reporting is incredibly complex, because we have about 700 different kinds of professional staff. And when you want to understand the larger picture in terms of patterns of who's where we're adding staff and where we're taking staff away, you really need to get into those subgroups, and those are a little bit trickier, and we are not comfortable sharing those out until we really know that that data is clean. So I'm not going to prepare that level of granularity here today. but I am going to show you some of the kinds of analyses, and this is really a preliminary snapshot of some of the kinds of conversations we're having to try to understand what's going on. But it's not definitive, and it should not be the basis for policy making at this point. But I think the sense of the board, as I took it, was that this is an incredibly complex issue,
Right.
and it deserves more than a knee-jerk reactionary response, so let's take some time to start to understand. And if you see avenues that are promising, we'll continue to pursue them as we have time available. So with that, Jill? I just wanted to start again, this is something I said earlier this morning for those who are here, but just to really emphasize that educators are the most valuable resource in every school system. They're 80% of our expenses. We need to be very careful when we talk about these numbers, because these are really the people who realize the dream of education for our children. The conversation about reasonable class size, I want to thank you to the NEA for engaging in a robust conversation around this with us. The class size research treats classes of 15 to 17 as small. It does not contemplate systems with smaller class sizes, which doesn't mean definitively one way or the other that there aren't advantages. But I think what we do know from the research is that some groups benefit from smaller class sizes. In particular, students who are living in poverty and really struggling with the challenges of poverty, kids who are English language learners may benefit from small class sizes and targeted instruction. Kids with disabilities also benefit from smaller groupings. Some classes actually benefit from being larger. Orchestra and PE are the obvious candidates, but there are also other larger classes where we know you want that breadth and depth of diversity of opinion. Some students are very self-maintaining. There are groups that, because of the composition, they can be larger and there's no negative impact to the children. But there are other groups that need to be smaller. Appropriate class sizes are also a function of physical space. One of the challenges some of our systems have is they have very small rooms. If they have small rooms, there's a limit to how many bodies you can put in them. Those limits are different for high school students and elementary students. So thinking about what the optimal class size, I throw that in to remind us that this is a complicated question. It's not just a one-size-fits-all necessarily answer. We know class sizes are most beneficial for our youngest students. In some of the research on older students, there's a sort of diminishing return seen in the research. As your class size gets small, it doesn't look like there's marginal increases on average. It may be different for some groups of students than others, but on average, you don't see those additional benefits. And just to also remind us that schools are ecosystems, and the individual groupings of teachers and students exist in the context of larger configurations, and sometimes, particularly secondary level, teachers teach multiple classes. So as important as class size is overall workload. You may be able to handle a class of 30 high-performing students, but when you start to have 5 sections of 30 students, it becomes a different animal. So you have to really think not just of the individual grouping, but also of the overall workload. And some of our schools, including Burlington, it was great here to talk today and hear some of these teachers talk about how their systems have supported equity and leadership by allowing them to teach part-time but also have other responsibilities. And so there are many ways to balance workload but also achieve ambitious goals. So that was that. Just to qualify a little bit the basis for some of the data I'm going to show you, this is from Vermont Public Schools that were open both in school year 04 and school year 14. So we're doing a comparison across 10 years. And so we had to eliminate schools that were open in the early frame and have closed, or vice versa. We're also only looking at public schools. The total sample is 292 Vermont public schools, and that's about 96% of our Vermont public school population. Within this, I'm going to break it down, and there'll be a subset of schools, 63 schools that increase their full-time equivalents while their student enrollment declined. So of those schools, 63 in that overall sample actually were increasing staffing as numbers decline. And there's a subset that I also want to look separately at just high schools. We'll also be conducting this as we roll out with elementary schools. But what we know is that, what I can tell you is that high schools, this group of 63 includes both high schools and elementary schools that have increased staffing while they've reduced enrollment. We think that there may be different reasons driving that pattern at different levels. They are a minority of the schools, but it's worth thinking about that in that context. Just to be very clear, we're looking at patterns. We don't have any causal explanations. This is really a discussion only. If we see patterns that are interesting, we can try to follow up with them and get a better understanding of what's actually going on. And we also hope in the future to break down these analyses further by type, by job function, but we're only going to look at staff today. Now I've made it sound like this is a really big deal, and it's not, so get ready for a letdown. So the question we've been grappling with at the agency is, do systems of different size adjust their full-time equivalents differently in response to changes in enrollment? And this comes from comments that have been made to us in preliminary conversations. When you think of a very small elementary school, if you have 2 classes of 12, it's difficult to put them together to have a class size of 14. If it's a slightly larger system with more grouping, the hypothesis was that it would be easier to as people retired, maybe reduce the classes without having excessive teaching loads. That was one hypothesis. At the high school level, high schools have to offer a breadth and depth of opportunity for kids, and that means they can't just cut science because they have fewer students. They really have to maintain that breadth and depth of programming. If you're a very small system, the hypothesis was, based on what principals have been telling us, is that that might make it more difficult in a very small system to adjust staffing levels as people disappear from your system. So moving on. So just to give you a brief cut, what we found is that very small schools are a little more likely in Vermont to increase their FTE as numbers decline. The red line I dropped on there is a line that marks where the 6 to 1 ratio of staff to teachers is. So that shows you the left is school year 2004, the right is school year 2014. And what you can see is that if you think about that in terms of teacher ratios, in 2004, most schools had a ratio higher than 6 to 1 in terms of staff to student. And now clearly in this group, this small group of schools, in 2014, it's shifting down. So what we are seeing is in small schools, they're a little bit more likely to increase their full-time equivalents as numbers decline. You want to head to the next? Yep.
When looking at these numbers earlier, I was always puzzled by the fact that the FTE normally means including all personnel employed by the school.
That's what this is right here.
You refer to them as teachers.
I'm sorry. I meant to say
so
staff. It says staff here, and I'm sorry.
Whether you're a janitor.
Thank you for correcting me.
or
This is all staff in. This is all inclusive. In fact, every chart moving forward, if I make that same mistake, every chart moving forward is staff.
Thank you.
Can I just make a distinction? Is that are you including building support?
It's
when you
all
say
staff. Yes.
Janitors?
Yes, all in. So this doesn't tell you where the increase occurred. What it tells you that in small systems,
It has occurred.
as people decline, they're actually in this subset of schools, they're actually increasing. And the mean, you can see the means there. So Jill, if you go to the next one, I'll call that for you.
Sorry, Rebecca.
Oh, yes.
Really quickly.
Oh, this is actually overall. Sorry. Go ahead.
I just want to make sure I'm understanding the way the sentence is worded. Is it that small schools were more likely to intentionally increase by hiring more staff as numbers declined, or that the ratio became an increase staff member as numbers declined?
This subset is a subset of all the 4 types. There are schools that had declines in enrollment and increased staff, schools that had declines in enrollment and decreased staff. There are schools that had increases in enrollment and decreased staff, and there are schools that increased enrollment and increased staff. This is just looking at that quadrant that had increases in staff and declines in enrollment. And they tended to be, they're proportionally more small schools.
How many
Increases in staff and declines in enrollment?
Yes.
Okay, thank
Yes.
So are they increases in new staff, or is it just a percentage increase in staff because of decline?
New people. They're actually carrying more FTE than they were. So there was a quadrant that actually had about 60-something schools that actually hired more people to serve a smaller number of students. We don't know why. I'm not making any statements or generalizations on appropriateness. I'm just saying this is a phenomenon we'd observed. There may be very good reasons for that. So, okay. So the other thing, now I'm looking more at high school specifically, because I think high school dynamics are very different than elementary dynamics, and I'm just going to give you a quick snapshot of what we're seeing at the high school level. These are the high school enrollments, same thing on the left, 2003 to 2004. The right is 2013 to 2014. Just the size of the high schools in Vermont, and at the high school level is declining. The red bar, is cutting at 400 students, and what you can see is our population is sort of shifting into high schools smaller than 400. And the mean was 471. It's down almost 100 to 387 over that 10-year period. So Jill, keep going. So just called it out. Okay, so you can see the means, and the mean ratio of high school. Those 19 high schools, now this is just high schools that have increases in staffing, increases in FTE, and declining enrollments. What you can see in those high schools is how that plays out in terms of the staff to student ratio.
Increase in ratio or increase in absolute numbers of staff?
They had both. You didn't get into this quadrant unless you had an absolute increase in numbers of staff, and that's playing out in these ratios. This is taking out and pulling out for analysis only the schools, the high schools, the 19 high schools in the state that increased FTE even as their numbers went down. So that's what this is. And it's just showing you how that plays out. And I think it's worth, Jill, let me see the next one. Notice, okay, go back one. Notice you can see the means there. 6.73 is the mean staff ratio in 04. 5.1 in 14. There was one that was as low as about 2.9. So we have some very low ratios in some of our high schools currently. Food for thought. Okay. Food for thought. I wanted to throw this up because just in terms of staffing, someone mentioned something to me about how much teachers are paid, and I did want to throw this out, in part because of a comment Krista made. But this is actually data courtesy of the state treasurer. I'm shifting on, I want this to be the backdrop, because we need to, when we talk about declining enrollments and losing teachers and adjustment, we need to also think about the sort of macro picture or context in which this is taking place. This is a comparison of the actual and adjusted salaries for educators in the retirement system. The blue line is the average salaries, and then the red line are when you adjust for CPI, Consumer Price Index. So I think the takeaway from this is that, yes, salaries have increased dramatically if you just look at the dollar value in current dollars, but the reality is that it's been pretty flatlined over the last 20 years. So it's not like we're paying teachers a lot more than we were really, relative to inflation. So I think I think it's important to just have that context or perspective as we go forward. And then the last one, I just wanted to make sure that we put this on the table in the context of what I said in my secretary's report. This is the ratio of active members in the retirement system to retirees in the retirement system. And this is a graph, when I saw this, that really gave me pause, because I think it's important to remember that when we're funding our budgets today, we're also funding for posterity in terms of staff. And when you look at the number of teachers who are actively teaching to support think about the relative number of retirees each of those teachers is going to support. And that's why people are working so hard to make sure we're fully funding the retirement system. I think the unfortunate piece is that new teachers will have to bear the brunt of that, not the older teachers, but the reality is we have to figure out how to deal with this, and it's worth, these are complicated problems, and I'm actually an optimist. Bill, going back to how you ended under my secretary's report, we have some profound financial challenges. We need to really be very deliberate and very focused about how we target our resources, because we cannot afford to be. This last graph suggests that we have a significant responsibility that's going to be difficult to fund. And so it's not just the declining enrollments currently, but we also need to think about our commitments moving forward in terms of what we've promised. And it's just worth knowing how broad that challenge is as we make policy decisions, because they're going to have profound impacts, often beyond the immediate target of that policy. So I think that's really it. I don't think there's any more. And that was a very brief snapshot, because I know it's lunchtime and I knew this was a packed agenda. But going forward, what generating this did was give us an opportunity to really begin cleaning and building data sets that we can then use to try to answer some of the questions that you were posing, Krista. And I think, as Bill will confirm, building a data set is sometimes the most time-consuming piece of it. And our hope is that as we move forward, we can continue to try to challenge us to think about it. And my goal today in part was to help us understand that it's not just class size, it's system size. And there's an interaction there that shapes the responsiveness and the ability to make decisions in ways that are supportive and supportive of both the children and the professionals who work there.
Krista.
And thank you, Rebecca, because I feel like sometimes there's even misunderstanding with the vocabulary when we say staff to student or student to teacher, and that can cause different reactions to people, especially in policy when you think about teaching. And I do appreciate looking at class sizes too, and I do think that sometimes it gets mixed in and people just look at the ratio and then think that's the class sizes. And so it's different all around different schools and trying to understand why and what the implications are. And so thank you for starting to dig into that.
I think that's right. And I think one of the things I realized that I haven't been careful enough to say is the teacher-student ratio is one thing, and there are places where I do believe we really have a challenge. Mm-hmm. It's not universal across the state, and that is a fact. Also, when, for example, Burlington has this teacher-student ratio of 15, it doesn't mean that every teacher is looking at 15 kids, because at any given time, some kids are in PE, some are in music, and teachers need planning periods. So it's what the operating effective class size is a little bit higher generally than that average system size. There are high schools that have a 4-to-1 teacher-student ratio. If you have a 4-to-1 teacher-student ratio, it is probable that those class sizes are very small. So there are some systems that have very, very small sizes, and those are choices.
Could you provide this electronically, this information?
I can, and I also have we have a meeting, I can't remember if it's tomorrow or Thursday, to finalize a spreadsheet that includes a slightly more comprehensive look at this data, as well as some figures, and we'll be sending out, posting on our website, but I will include that with this as well.
Krista?
Is there any data going back to students and what the students' experiences, the amount of students that they're with in various classes? Does it go to that level? So if we look at an average student and in their classes, are they seeing 20 to 30 or whatever that average, does that exist? So no, it's kind of breaking down the adult.
It's actually a good number, and we know what tends to happen in nationally, but we don't have that data at the agency, right?
I got a data question. I'm concerned that the number of teachers is going down that is supporting my retirement check.
You should be, Bill.
But
you're welcome.
The thing is how can that number decline when the number of total teachers is sort of level at 8?
The retirement system includes teachers. It also, and I actually asked Beth Pierce about it when she labeled, that was her graph, so I can't change the headers. But what I did ask her to do is to call it the educators' retirement system, because my understanding is it also includes administrators. So, and when you think about across different functions, there are some categories that have held stable, there are other categories that have increased, and there are others that have declined. So that's on average. So we are seeing, I think we have to get to the kind of nuanced analysis that Krista was talking about. We were not able to prepare it for this meeting because there is a story to be told, because we are seeing declines in some kinds of teachers. We're seeing increases in some kinds of teachers, and we're seeing declines and increases in different kinds of administrative functions as well. And we're seeing a tremendous increase in paraprofessionals.
Okay.
For a different category. But the teacher retirement system is certified licensed educators.
But the staffing numbers included the paraeducators.
Our staffing includes paraeducators, so those are slightly different groups. The last two from Beth Pierce don't include paraprofessionals.
So obviously, this information is going to be very valuable as we go forward with the discussion this winter. Will you be digging deeper in this, or what's your thought about where you go with this?
Our hope was to go where Krista was talking about. It took us longer to get the database and the data cleaned than we thought it would. So we'll do the best we can. We hope to turn to that kind of more fine-grained analysis across functions. So disaggregating by types of teachers and types of administrators.
Other questions or comments? Thank you. That's fascinating and I think very helpful.
Questions what to do about it.
Well, we'll hear more about that when we get the legislative report agenda later on today.
I thought you were going to talk about that at lunch.
I don't see lunch out, so why don't we move to the strategic plan? And I'll call on Bonnie. But I want to start by commending Bonnie and the committee for their work on this. I know it's been difficult, but we're required to do this by statute every 5 years. And I think you've done, from my point of view, you've done a great job. And so I hope that we can take some final action on this today.
Okay.
Bonnie, with that great introduction.
With that great introduction, thank you. I'm going to repeat Stephen in some ways, because I do want to thank the committee, because I think they did an incredible amount of work on this. And also just the board. There's a board also, and over the last, I feel like we've talked about this for the last 6 months. I think we have. That the board has also provided comments and input to the strategic plan. I was impressed and not surprised to see all of the comments that we got from folks. And I think not only comments, but resources that people provided, which I think will help us as we move forward in terms of doing our work. So that's great. I think that what's really important here is that this was warned as a draft, and we certainly will take the public comments into consideration as we put the final touches. I think there were a number of comments that will help us just better focus and clarify the direction that we're headed in. I also appreciated the addition, in addition to comments, we also got a number of offers for help from folks and some of our partners, so don't be surprised as we definitely take you up on that, especially as we start to work to write up the white papers that we said we would do. But there's a lot of work, and I'm really excited about where we're headed and the fact that I believe that this strategic plan is a plan that will evolve over time and will adjust as things change. And I think that's really, really important as we move forward. And I don't know if there are other comments. Do we want to take other comments?
We do, but I want to take board comments first. If anyone has any thoughts, even though we've been involved. If not, I would ask our audience if there's any comments from the audience. Stacy?
I was very impressed by everyone's level of engagement, like Bonnie said, and lots of offers to help and really thoughtful comments. I did feel like there were several instances where I felt like there were conversations we had had both at the board level and on a committee level about why we had made certain choices, and people were either unsure or felt like we had missed something. I almost want there to be a cover sheet or a something, and maybe as we get more details, it'll become unnecessary, but I think very intentionally the state board chose 2 goals, not 7 goals, and very intentionally tried to hone in on particular things, not that others weren't important, but to really make sure we were a board that was actively using the strategic plan for decision-making guided by 2 key points. And it seemed to me like maybe that we needed to add that, or just even add it when we're asking people for comments. This is why it's written in this way, this is why it might look different. Doesn't mean it's right, or that people have to like it, but I think the intentionality behind it, maybe people didn't know.
Okay. Krista?
First of all, thank you. I mean, this is really months of work of coming together, and I was so happy when I was reading it and I was going through. I was like, wow, this is kind of everything, all these conversations. I could hear everybody's voice from the board in the document, which was really great. You could see at a certain point, be like, that was Stacy, and that's Sean Marie. And it's like you could hear it in there, and I appreciate that. And I also appreciate that this is a living document. It's not something that we should just say yes and then put in a vault. And so I really appreciate all the comments that we got from the public. I was a little overwhelmed at the amount of comments. I thought that was amazing. And I read through all of them, and I like those resources. And if this is a living document, I hope that we can take pieces of those comments and fit it in. I think where this works is that it has the brevity and some of that details that we can do. That's our work. And I don't think we need that in a document that we lock away. So I'm hoping that we revisit this, and again, just want to thank you and thank all the people that took the time to write.
What I want to do, assuming that we adopt this today, is have a brief discussion of how the board wants to proceed on a monthly or quarterly basis. You're right, this is a living document, and whether it's living or not, I think from a policy point of view, we ought to be on a regular basis, coming back and looking at it. So, but I want to have that conversation after we take the comments on the plan itself. Sean Marie.
I was really appreciative of all of the input and impressed that people actually responded to the calls for comments. So I think what I hear both Bonnie and Stephen saying is that you're not looking, or you're thinking that we're not going to actually change some of this language today before we vote on it. So my question is, if we don't change any of the language and we adopt this, does that then become the document we work off of for the next 4 years?
Right.
5?
Yeah, and we get to change the date because it's 2015 to 2020, not 14.
Yes.
So my overall feeling was, I think, and again, I wasn't part of the committee, and that's sometimes what happens for those sitting on the sidelines, is that some of the comments resonated with me in terms of, really resonated with me with the kind of passive, sort of not strong enough language for what we meant. And that resonated throughout many different comments within whatever they were saying in the direction one way or the other. But, generally, virtually, easily, things like that really struck me as not wanting to seem that we weren't wanting to really say what we meant. And I go back to something I say frequently, which is that the relevance of the state board is making a statement that is not, that has nothing to do with getting reelected or, being lobbied. This is a document that the board believes in, and maybe for all of us to agree, it has to be a little passive. And that's what happens when you have 9 or 10 people at a table. The word ensure and ensure, of course, jumped out at me as it was identified. And the word issues, which I know we struggled with when you were here and not here, Bonnie, still comes up to me, and I just wonder if, the word trends sends a non-academic message when you say, like, goal number 2, economic and 21st century trends. Again, there's some pieces I would like to see small language changes, but I know Stephen's going to, put me to the end of the table. But I'm also okay with it as a living document.
Mark, is there anything wrong with being at the end of the table?
I like the view.
If Carol were here, she'd say I had to sit here. I'm done.
Yes, Margaret.
Hi, I think the committee did work hard, and we did that somewhat in a small group and in isolation, and it is fabulous that we got all these comments. And I know we've individually read the comments, but as a committee, we haven't, as a group, discussed the comments and discussed, and I'm not suggesting that we make any dramatic changes. I mean, I'm happy with the draft we came up with, but I think it would be useful for the committee to reconvene and just have a short conversation about the comments and points like you've just made before we as a board vote on it.
Other thoughts?
Dylan looks like he's going to say something.
Mark?
Yeah, I'm a little sensitive to the nature of putting things off, but I completely understand what you're saying, Margaret. And I wonder to what extent that this is sort of a living document that we can't approve this and have the committee reconvene and then come back and then start making tweaks to it on a regular basis as needed. Because it would be nice to have this in place as we roll into January. Okay.
Are there comments from the summary?
Well, I agree with Mark, and January is a pivotal point, especially when we talk about the legislature convening. But we're also going to postpone our legislative breakfast until February, if that means anything in the bigger picture. So I'm done.
Are there any comments from the public on our proposed strategic plan? Yes, sir.
Could you please actually define for me education leaders at the top of page 3?
I presume what probably, I'm not on the committee, but I would think, what way I guess I read that is knowing the 30% turnover rate in principals, that there's an issue in replacing superintendents often.
Team leaders.
So, and team leaders, so am I close?
Yeah, you are. I mean, that was,
But it could be a little misleading because we have a lot of wonderful teacher leaders, and there's not necessarily a shortage of them. So we're specifically we were talking about administration issues.
administrators, yeah.
Thank you for mentioning the teacher leaders, because I was wondering if your strategic plan, if in discussion you were reflecting the landscape to include teachers as leaders.
Yeah, teachers are leaders, so yes. And perhaps it's misleading that way.
Other comments? If not, Bill, did you have a?
Just to echo some comments that have been made, I was also struck or picked up on the passive nature of the language that was pointed out in the document, and I think it's right. But I think it raises some fundamental questions of exactly what authority the board has to implement this stuff anyway, and whether
that was why we ended up.
we're doing cheerleading stuff, or do we have the capacity to take on a more active role? We do in the rules-making process, but that's about it. I think it's something we should think about. It's something we should discuss and act on.
Is there a motion on the strategic plan?
Move to accept this strategic plan as presented.
Is there a second to Mark's motion?
I'll second.
Krista seconds. Further discussion? If not, all those in favor, yes?
So can you tell me who the committee is? Bonnie?
Stacy.
Stacy, Bill?
And
Margaret.
Margaret.
Bill also?
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, Bill.
Yes or no?
Yes.
He was a late arrival.
So you would think with all those people serving on the committee, I'd have the votes for passage here.
Well, no, it's funny because I heard, as Krista just said, I definitely heard voices in the, you don't need to commit me, in the strategic plan. And I will go with the will of the board. I will not vote against it, but I would like to see the committee look at the comments, which is why I think you ask for comments so that you can synthesize them and say, oh, well, of course this came from here, and oh, we did discuss this, and you validate the fact that you asked for input. So I'm not wanting to put it off because people worked hard on it. I think it validates it even more. If you ask for input and you don't even consider it, then next time we ask for input, who's going to give you input? So that's my only concern about, the perception we put out there. If we're asking for input and we just say, okay, well, we'll just move along and take it in.
I made the assumption that we got the input, and we had it in advance, we all read it, and if we had suggestions from the input, we would be amending the plan today, or referring it back to the committee with references to certain comments.
We did get the input. We did read the input as individuals, but the committee hasn't discussed the input and suggested any changes based on it. That is something that we could do. We may decide to make no changes based on the input. We may decide to make slight changes based on the input. I don't know.
Would
Because
the
we
sky
haven't
fall
talked
if
about
we
it.
put it off a month so
Yeah.
that we could have that conversation?
I'd be
Krista?
happy with that.
I'm just looking at the second to last paragraph, and it talks about this is considered a working document which will be revisited regularly, in whole or in part. in order to incorporate new information, re-examine priorities, and develop synergy between the state board and all stakeholders. So that's where I guess I'm viewing this as we're accepting this, and then I would assume that this committee would not disappear, that this is a committee that needs to continue, and that accepting it in this form, and it is a working document, and that's what it actually says, it's a working document. And so I would assume that we would continue to talk about this, and I hope, Chair, that maybe we could talk about even next meeting after, having time to let the committee meet again and to re-examine those comments. And it would seem that any changes that need to be made, that it could be done from that. I don't know, that's just the way I was reading that this isn't supposed to be an end. And so that, I guess that's why I interpreted it as we were taking comments, because this is where we're going, but now we can re-examine. And like I said, I feel like a lot of those comments were really helpful in putting us into more specific direction and where to go. And so I hope that we do build off of this, and it's not just a vote and it's done. So I'm just reading the document and that's just the way I read it, and I'm not sure if others are reading it the same way.
The motion before us is to approve the strategic plan as proposed by the committee.
I would propose an amendment that the committee meet one more time and take action in January.
Is there a second to Bill's motion to table?
So we're tabling one and adding bills?
What?
Is that a friendly amendment, or is that a different amendment?
I can go either way, but I would suggest a separate amendment just to keep it clear.
Okay.
So your amendment is to table a vote on this until January?
Yes, certain.
Okay. A motion to table is not debatable, so I will call the question. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? I hear one no, and the ayes have it, and we will table action on the strategic plan until the January meeting.
So do we need?
It was a motion to table.
It was a table. It was a table. Motion to table. I don't think you need a second.
Yeah, it does need a second. Who did
does.
second?
I'll second.
Okay, Margaret seconded.
So here's a question. So do we need to warn it as a vote now, again, for January?
Well, it's tabled.
Yeah.
So it needs to be a majority vote to take it off the table first, before you can bring it up for discussion.
Oh, okay.
Now, I think the assumption in the motion that you just adopted is that the strategic planning committee would get together in between now and the January board meeting and review the notes in relation to the draft.
Sounds like a plan.
Okay. We'll stand
I
in
have nothing else to do.
I'm sure you're just lying around.
We'll stand in recess. Do we need a full hour for lunch, or you want to come back in 45 minutes? Legislative agenda. And I'll call on the chair, Mr. Mathis, to update us where we are.
Okay, you should have draft number 7, and
Should make the strategic planning committee feel pretty good, huh?
well, yeah, it's
That's right. Did you take any comments on this? Okay.
Yes, I'm sure we're about to right now.
I was going to put it out for public comment.
Actually, he did take comment.
So this draft 7 does differ from versions 1 through 6, and this thing has evolved as the committee has talked by telephone and met, and also since we looked at it, I think we looked at version 5 at the last board meeting. So this is 2 iterations later. There's not a lot of substantive change, but there's some refinements in wording and presentation. It does start with a strategic plan, and also it has these summary bullets which are at the beginning, which raises a further question that we can just talk about. Is this goes on for 5 pages, and giving the reading and attention span of most people that would be looking at this document, we expect that they won't read it. So I would think of this plan as being something that guides our work as a board more so than how it's going to work in the legislature. I think we ought to talk about how we want to present ourselves as regards the legislature, It is going to be a wild and woolly session, and there's going to be things that are going to be jumping on finance. Thus, we have principles on finance. There's going to be organizational things and so forth. And I'm thinking that what we need to do is, before February, is to meet with, as I mentioned earlier this morning, is meet with the legislative chairs of the key committees and say, we'd like to see some action on this, see if we can get people to draft bills and have things going, and then work in that fashion as opposed to just simply having a breakfast, and which is ceremonial but doesn't accomplish much substantively. So with that introduction, I would leave it for your questions, comments, editorials, revisions.
Let me follow up on a comment you just made. I think that the role of this committee this year is going to be much more active, much more involved than it has been in the past. I'm pleased, Bill, that you're thinking of meeting with the chairs as soon as they're appointed. I think that's important that you do that. But I think that that there'll be a lot of activity in the legislature on these various issues that we want to stay involved in. Following up on Jeff's comment at the beginning of the meeting, and which will mean that, and with Jill's help, it will mean that there'll be a lot of communication between meetings on what's going on. But the committee, I think, has got to be a lot more involved this year than it has been in the past. I think we have a lot to contribute, a lot we can add to these conversations, and we just need to be prepared to do that.
Yeah. Rebecca?
In that vein, what I find is that every day there's a new proposal in the legislature already, and the session hasn't started. So just with respect to page 4 and educational quality standards assessment and accountability, I just wanted to put out there that there is some indication that there will be some effort in the legislature to really define metrics or criteria for evaluating school quality, and I hope that the state board can be involved in very actively around that conversation, because I feel like we have that outlined in the education quality standards. And personally, I think the agent, I'm going to speak for myself, but also the agency, we are hopeful that the board can continue to play a powerful role in keeping our vision of what good education is broad, because it is much more than what's defined in federal accountability, and we really need the board to play a strong role in advocating for that, so that we don't bind ourselves into a limited set of quality indicators that don't really speak to the breadth and depth of what our schools need and need to provide for our children. And in addition, if we are going to do school quality reviews, we would like the indicators that we're looking at in the context of those rules to be the ones that are shared statewide, and they need to reflect obviously benchmarks for student learning, but also indicators of school quality and school climate and culture, and the extent to which we support equity goals around that as well.
Where are you on that right now? In terms of development?
We should have in the next day, we're meeting actually, I can't remember my schedule, Wednesday or Thursday with Amy to talk through another round of indicators. We've been working with our leadership team to qualify and formalize what we hope to capture in the context of those reviews and align that with the developing longitudinal data system. And we also have work going on with respect to surveys of schools, teachers, students, parents, bunch of other indicators. I don't want to digress too much. I just think that the board needs to be deeply involved in that conversation so that we're all headed in the same direction.
Absolutely. If a piece of legislation caught fire that would go to a heavy test-based accountability system, that would be not the way we want to go.
Mm-hmm.
And you'd have to alert the committee as to doing something about it and jumping in on it.
Mm-hmm. I will. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Also, having a document that has this thing developed at the point that you're ready to share it is to, I think briefing the legislature is very important to preempt any kind of dysfunctional move.
Mm-hmm.
On that point, I was wondering how this board would feel when this is adopted. about sending this letter not just to politicians working on the education committee, but all politicians, and maybe along with what you're saying, our letter on our statement on accountability and assessment. And so that maybe pairing those two together. When I was last year at the legislature, when something was coming to a vote, people were like, well, I haven't heard anything about this. I don't know. So people on the committee were deeply embedded, but then people that were not on the education committee felt a little out of step. So I'm just wondering how this board felt about that communication, not just, so is it, if we're going to adopt a broad statement, just to publicize things that we've already done?
I think I would also refer them to the education quality standards, which really outlines a much broader vision. For example, Rebecca Haslam was mentioning how we need to provide every child with access to high quality pre-kindergarten. That's an opportunity to learn. If people have differential access to that, they have differential opportunity to learn. We manufacture the achievement gap. That's the kind of quality indicator we're looking at. What are the kinds of opportunities that we provide? And that's really implicit in the education quality standards. We have to go beyond simple test-based metrics, and these are examples of some of the other things that we're looking at. Does this system provide ongoing systematic support for professional growth and learning so that teachers actually can deliver and help students reach the high expectations that we have for them? Things like that.
Sean Marie.
So I would propose that, we don't need to do it in paper. We can do it via email. That that we send out an email with those documents attached to all the House and Senate elected officials with just a little preamble in the email with the attachments. Now, again, they may read the first page, and if they're interested, they can read the corresponding larger explanation. The EQS, I myself have a difficult time trying to explain to lay people what exactly it is. They want to know, is it credits for high school? Is it, what, is it the standards? Is it the, and I think, and we can certainly put this on an agenda item if Stephen would allow it, the idea of how NASB might be able to help us frame it into not that we would lessen it, but that we'd be able to communicate it to the public in terms of what it is. I know we have Jill and communication specialists, but they have a lot to do.
Can I just ask Jill a question?
Yes.
Jill, do we have a short version that summarizes key highlights of the EQS already? Yes. So why don't we do a layperson short version that we can create and then send to you maybe to review, and if that works, we can just I can work with Perry to help set that up. Okay.
So I was going to ask that question, knowing that we don't have any staff at the board level. Is it reasonable for the board to ask the agency to send our legislative agenda, the summary of EQS, and with a short letter that the chair of the legislative committee would write?
Well,
okay. So it's already done. I think we can do that relatively easily if the legislative committee chair writes the letter.
Okay, we can do that. Perry, did we send all legislators the assessment letter or the assessment letters?
No.
Let's,
okay.
Having some experience of knowing what legislators read and don't read, let's not overload even though we're doing it
this may be
electron-
taxing.
Well, I don't know if it's taxing. I don't mean to insult anyone, but
No, I don't either.
But there's a number of public policy issues that are going to be contacting legislators on. So let's not overwhelm them, and hopefully they'll read some of this. It would be my point.
Okay.
Okay. Is there any thoughts or perhaps a motion on adopting the legislative agenda?
I'll make a motion.
Yes. Wait a minute.
For an opportunity for...
Yes, and I apologize. I meant to offer that. Yes.
I'm Mill Moore. I'm the executive of the Vermont Independent Schools Association, and I want to address the bullet point on the top of page 4 titled Equality of Opportunity in Independent Schools, which I find a very discouraging and negative approach to the problem of opportunity, and I would like to ask the board to work with us and our association and our community to find a way to approach this in a more constructive fashion.
I'm sure that we'd be willing to work with you in any kind of way on the issue.
Well, I certainly appreciate that, but the wording that I see here, I find very unfortunate.
Is it inaccurate?
I find it inaccurate.
Do you want to?
Do you have a
I don't want to
suggestion?
engage in the debate with the committee here today about opportunity and state money and all of that sort of thing. This is a far more complicated situation than how many sentences do we see here. 2 sentences can encompass.
Yeah, Sean Marie.
So, Mr. Moore, the idea of this is not to criticize the independent schools, but to make aware that I believe what I believe we're saying is that we want the same equal opportunity in the public schools as in the independent schools if they're receiving public funds. And you can read that negatively, or you can read that as it's written. And I don't think it's meant to be taken, at least from my point of view, not to be taken with a negative tone, but more of a, we're asking the legislature to review early ed implementation, virtual schools, and that's just another bullet
Part of our
point.
legislative agenda going forward is to ask, and also our agenda in dealing with this board and with the Agency of Education, is to ask for easing of the approval requirements on independent schools that want to add more special ed. Independent schools find themselves in a catch-22 situation on special ed right now. They are required to go through a rather onerous and lengthy pre-approval process before they can begin to deliver special ed services, whereas a public school simply goes ahead and writes a check or hires an administrator and an instructor. So to criticize independent schools for not doing enough special ed, while at the same time making it very difficult for them to add services, is one of the problems that I'm referring to here. And there are several other instances that I can cite. But again, I don't want to engage in a back and forth here today. I want to engage in a conversation with the people who are writing this and find a way to address this in a way that we find more encouraging and less threatening. This is basically S91 that we faced in the last biennium. And we found that extremely threatening, and we contested it very strongly in the legislature.
Do you have any suggested language and what might replace?
Well,
language?
having only seen it 5 minutes ago, I'm not ready to do that yet, Mr. Chairman.
Response from the committee?
So Bill, I can speak for myself. I think that over the last couple years, we've grappled with this, and I'm not referencing S91, but the idea of how do students in independent schools have the same opportunities, whether it be special ed or academics or internships or whatever it may be. And again, from my point of view, I think we, as a board, we've talked about making sure that those opportunities for our Vermont students are there. And so I don't take this as negatively. It just says, we think that they should be developed. It says enabling statutes need to be developed so that, that could be, you're assuming it might be more onerous, whereas somebody else might assume that this is going to be less onerous.
Well, I'm speaking for a community of 124 independent schools that educate approximately 10% of all of the K through 12 students in Vermont. And we regard this as unfortunate and unhelpful. And we're appealing, I'm appealing, for it to be moderated and for a more cooperative relationship between this board and my community.
Well, I guess I would point out that this language has been in prior drafts as well. This isn't new language in draft 7. And the other thing I would point out is that, as I have often said and as the board has said, in the next bullet point where we recognize what the independent schools, what they contribute in Vermont, we acknowledge how important that is to our system. So don't take it personally. That I think the point of view here is that we're making sure that Vermont children are getting the the right educational services as needed. I don't know. Well, thoughts from other board members.
It was not meant as criticism in any stretch of the imagination. Here is just a principle, equality of opportunity for all kids, regardless of whether you're in a public school or in a private school. You still have the equality of opportunity. That's all. No criticism intended. And there have been anecdotes that perhaps there has been some discrimination by handicapping condition. If there is a problem with independent schools getting special education approval, that would be something for the agency to deal with, and it's not on my scope, but if you say it's there, I'll trust you.
Other comments or questions from board members of Mr. Moore? Okay.
Thank you.
Are there other members of the public that wish to make comments on the proposed legislative agenda? Okay. What action would the board like to take on draft 7 of the proposed legislative agenda?
Is there a required action?
Yeah, we need to approve it at some point.
I make a motion to accept the draft 7 of the legislative agenda.
I'll second that.
That's been seconded. Other discussion? Not seeing any. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. The ayes have it. I believe it's unanimous. Okay, we'll move on to the last agenda item, post-secondary school application that we reviewed at the last meeting from Royal University. I believe that this application was tabled at the last meeting. So if anyone wishes to discuss this particular application, the chair would entertain a motion to take the motion off, or the issue off the table.
I would think that our earlier motion to put a moratorium on virtual schools would prevail
Well,
and speak to this issue.
Have
Yes.
we talked, has either the agency or the university contacted the agency?
yes.
Only to tell them that it was tabled and moving forward. Can I add one other comment? My sense is that if this is tabled until the end of a moratorium so that rules can be revised, that the agency would like to refund the application fee, and that would be our commitment.
Refund the application?
I
Is that what
think
you
we
said?
have to,
Okay.
because we changed the rules midstream.
This is non-debatable, but I guess my comment would be, I think it's better to take it off the table, take action on it, and maybe in that, when you're taking action on that motion, actually suggest to the agency to return the application fee. I think it probably needs some separate action.
I would make that motion.
So you're moving to take it off the table. We really got two motions here.
Okay.
Is there a second to Bill's
Second.
motion? Second to Sean Marie. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. It's unanimous. The motion is back on the table. How would you like to respond to the post-secondary school application from Royal University?
Well, Perry is crafting my words for me, I'm sure.
He's already done.
Is that we reject the application of Royal University, and that the secretary refund the fee, and inform Royal University that we'll be glad to reconsider a new application once we review the rules and make changes as appropriate.
Is there a second to Bill's motion?
I second.
Krista seconded. Any discussion? Yes.
I guess I although I agree with this and I don't find these guidelines satisfactory, I guess I do feel a little bit of discomfort changing the rules midstream on these folks and not knowing anything about them. I think there's something that doesn't feel totally right. If they say, well, we followed all your rules and now you're telling us, I mean, I think they were steps away from approval. Is there any reason we should consider the moratorium
Yes.
separately from this particular
No.
application?
The problem is that if we set a precedent now, then we have another set of problems coming at us. If we accept these people whose application raised some questions, then what are we going to say to the next person who comes in the door?
Right, but to be fair, is it something specific about Royal University, or is it just that Oplerno and other ones got here earlier? Now that we've got this one, it's starting to raise more questions.
They're different scenarios. One is degree bearing and one is not. I think the germane issue is that these rules date from 1991 and they don't contemplate online institutions that are credit bearing and degree conferring. And so we don't have the rules to appropriately handle this kind of institution. And I think the way the motion was phrased, we're inviting them to reapply once we actually have language that can contemplate and support application of virtual universities.
All right, I'm comfortable with that.
Sean Marie.
It's not specific to them.
I'm fine. I think, I agree with what Rebecca says. I don't believe that we actually have rules that apply to what they're asking for, so we can't really act on what we don't have.
Any more discussion? If not, all those in favor of informing Royal University that we'll consider their application once the rules have been revised, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say no. The ayes appear to have it, the ayes do have it, and it's a unanimous vote. Any other issues that any member of the board would like to bring before the board? Sean Marie.
I was just wondering, I had thought I'd seen somewhere in an earlier draft, or maybe it was last month, the Dylan reporting on the information that he might receive from his blogging.
Yeah, it is, yeah, okay.
Was it on there?
It was under D, updates. I kind of skipped over it too on accident.
Do you want to? Or?
So, I don't really have any updates. There hasn't been any new emails actually to that SVA student rep email. I do kind of have an update. In January, I'm meeting with Daniel Brogan, who I had previously mentioned was a senior on the Massachusetts State Board last year, and I'm meeting with him about coming up with a state student advisory council in Vermont that would kind of talk about the education issues that we talk about and that teachers may talk about, and they may talk about in their schools, but they don't have a proper place for it. So it'd be a council that they actually have in Massachusetts. They call it the State Student Advisory Council, and they talk to the AOE, or I don't know if Massachusetts has a DOE or AOE or whatever. DOE. They talk to the DOE and to their own teachers in their districts and to their fellow students, and then report out. So.
Okay.
Great.
Krista.
Something that came up when Sean Marie, myself, we were in Boston, was we were talking about graduation requirements, and I was talking about the agency has already put together, they pulled standards out and come up with sort of a template for coming up with graduation requirements, and just if we could share those maybe at their next meeting, just so people see the work that the agency has done, because those actually are really helpful in my own practice and going through and what are those proficiencies we're looking for, and that was just something I could share. I'm like, oh, I know it's there. I've used it on the website, and they're already there for most content areas, and I know I'm very familiar with the ones for social studies, and I've looked at the ones for other subjects, but just so we could show off some of the work that the agency has done around graduation requirements, I think that would be helpful, I think, for the whole board to see what's happened, because that's part of EQS, and when we start talking about EQS, it would be a good thing to show off.
Awesome.
Yes.
I just wanted to give, I'm not sure I like this expression, but a shout out to Perry, because I really loved getting the overview of the packet. It was really helpful, and on my little post it says, "Yay, Perry!"
Well,
Nicely done, Perry.
apropos of my compliment I gave you outside when we went out to check the weather.
Share it with us.
No, I think this ought to go in the minutes. We should acknowledge the fine work that Perry is doing to service the board. As I mentioned to you outside, some of us were wondering if Carol could ever be replaced, but you have done a wonderful job in keeping us all up to date, so thank you.
In his own style.
Yes.
And I have said that before.
Any other compliments? Any other comments?
Give him time to get them all in.
Jeff Francis, the second
I'll work
chance.
yours for you, Lee.
Happy holidays, all.
Okay, move for adjournment.
Move to adjourn. Jean Marie
Happy New Year.
seconds. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, say no.